broke lockdown laws. If they both resign, then who are you looking at? And it wouldn't the party be in a mess, let alone government.
What a week for the Chancellor.
He's had a bad week. Well, apparently he spent many hours deciding what to do last night, should he resign. And he actually drafted a letter of resignation, which he didn't in the end give, and he's given instead an apology, like the Prime Minister.
He might be. I bet he hasn't shredded it, though. Might be holding on to it for some time. We shall see. Well, that is our main news today. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor, amongst 50 people, issued fines by the Metropolitan Police over lockdown breaches.
Yes, both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak apologised for those breaches, with the Prime Minister saying it didn't occur to him that the gathering he attended for his birthday in June of last year was a violation of the rules. Asked if he would resign, he responded like this.
I want to be able to get on and deliver the mandate that I have, but also to tackle the problems that the country must face right now, and to make sure that we get on with delivering for the people of this country. That is my priority.
Well, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, joined the growing chorus of voices pushing for Johnson to resign, saying the Conservatives are unfit to govern.
And a YouGov Snap poll last night revealed the majority of people think Boris Johnson should now resign, and 3/4 think the Prime Minister knowingly lied.
Well, let's talk to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's in Downing Street for us this morning. I mean, this is a distraction for the Prime Minister. It's a nightmare for the Chancellor, Tom.
It certainly is. When we're looking at the whole situation in the round, sometimes it can feel a bit like Groundhog Day back here in Downing Street, saying wait for Sue Gray's full report to come out once the Met Police investigation concludes. But of course, this new dynamic of the Chancellor being involved is something that few expected to happen, and few at this stage either. The fact that this set of fixed penalty notices has been issued with regards to an event on the 19th of June is incredibly significant. This was one of the probably one of the lesser known about events, certainly one of the ones that didn't attract all of the big headlines at the time. A 10-minute gathering in the Cabinet Room on the 19th of June amongst people who were in there for a meeting beforehand. It's easy to see why those sitting around that cabinet table may well have thought of this not as a party, but as some sort of work event that was stretching on beyond the meeting beforehand. Indeed, it's likely that they thought so much, or so little of it, I should say, that they briefed it out to the press at the time. On the 20th of June 2020, this particular event appeared in the pages of the Times newspaper as a bit of colour to a story about the Chancellor and the Prime Minister working hard, with a little bit of respite by having a bit of a birthday bash for Boris. Now, no one really noticed it at the time, not least the journalists who wrote it up, or the people who read it in the paper, or the people who briefed it out from the building behind me. But the fact that they did so, and that it appeared in the press on the 20th of June 2020, almost 2 years ago, and didn't make a particular splash, does lend credence to Number 10's argument that Boris Johnson did not consider it to be a party at the time. And why is that significant? Well, if Boris Johnson didn't consider that particular event to be a party, he may not have broken the ministerial code. If he did not lie to Parliament, i.e. in terms of saying that he thought that everything he did was lawful, he may well have been telling the truth there and simply misunderstanding the rules that he himself set. Now, of course, the criticism there comes is, shouldn't the Prime Minister know every jot and tittle of the rules that he set? Well, perhaps, but certainly it wasn't picked up at the time.
Tom, it's interesting, isn't it, that for a Tory at the moment, do they consider it as the Daily Mail, that, you know, don't they know there's a war on, getting at the people who are calling for resignations? And then you see the entirely other side of the story there in the Mirror, led by liars and lawbreakers. For the Tories, it's very difficult because Rishi Sunak is now involved. If you argue to get rid of Boris Johnson because of what he did, you now have to include Rishi Sunak, who was the obvious successor.
Well, exactly. This is one of the points that is saving the Prime Minister's skin, perhaps more than anything else. The unpredictability of what a leadership contest would look like. Of course, Conservative leadership contests are always pretty unpredictable. If we go back to 1975, few would have expected Margaret Thatcher would have become the leader of the Conservative Party. If we go up to 1990, who would have thought that John Major would be the person that emerged from the fray? And in 2001, who would have thought, indeed, that it was Ian Duncan Smith rather than everyone was expecting Michael Portillo? In 2005, David Cameron came completely out of the blue. Perhaps people were thinking David Davis would take that chalice. And, of course, in 2016, who would have thought Theresa May, the person who voted Remain, would become the Prime Minister after Brexit? These particular leadership contests are always very unpredictable. And so, in terms of trying to initiate one, different factions would have to be very clear within the Conservative Party as who their preferred candidate might be. And given the fact that Rishi Sunak is now implicated, given the fact that his stock has fallen within the Conservative Party and the country at large, potentially this would not be a clean or a swift affair. It would be a protracted leadership contest at the time of national crisis, something that is holding many people back from trying to put in their letters to the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady.
OK, Tom, look, for now, thank you. More reaction from Tom in a little bit later on this hour, not in a moment, because I need to give him a rest. Let's talk instead to political commentator and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Look, what is your take on this? Because we could almost, I think, look at the reaction to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor in different lights. I think they're in two different boats here.
It's interesting you say that they're in two different boats. I think if you look at the polling, I think 57% of Britons in the Snap poll yesterday said they wanted both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to resign. Now, obviously, in terms of the 2 weeks that the two gentlemen have had, they've been very different. The Prime Minister's had a very good week. He had a triumph in Ukraine over the weekend. I think a lot of people are very proud to see him standing shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian president at the weekend. Whereas, of course, with the Chancellor, we've seen this massive fall of grace from when he was seen as this magic money man Chancellor giving out money during the pandemic to his wife's non-dom status and his green card in the US. So it's been a very different week for the two men.
Which he's highlighted. I mean, the front of the Sun caught my eye this morning. I don't know what you think, Anna, this one. It's a picture of Boris saying, "I'm sorry, but I've got work to do." And actually, isn't that how a lot of people are just going to see it at the moment?
Yes, I completely understand that argument. There are people who say that there are crises going on in the world and in the country which are perhaps more important than whether or not the Prime Minister went to some parties. Not whether or not he did go to some parties, he's been charged. But then, of course, there's the other side of the story where this is the first Prime Minister to have broken the law whilst being in office, and that's also quite a big thing. So there are two sides of the argument and strong feelings on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, the front page of the Daily Mail says Boris was there. This is the breach of the law that we're talking about today is when he was so-called ambushed by a birthday cake. And the Daily Mail make the point, Boris was there for 9 minutes, carry less than 5. The birthday cake never left its Tupperware box. And last night, the Prime Minister rightly apologised as the left howls for resignations over their £50 COVID fines. Don't they know there's a war on? The problem is, and that's all very well, but the problem is, at the same time that this happened, people weren't able to visit their dying relatives. People were having to abide by rules that Boris clearly didn't, even if he didn't feel it was a breach of the rules. So, I mean, if he goes at a time like this, can we afford to lose Prime Minister and Chancellor at a time like this, I guess?
Well, first of all, I would say there's an election going on in France at the moment, so it's not out of the question that there are leadership changes during times of national and international crises. I think we could probably get through it. But I think it's interesting that many of the key Tory figures who were calling for the Prime Minister to stand down put their letters in a couple of months ago in January, Sir Roger Gale and Douglas Ross are saying, now is not the time.
It's interesting because talking to you, Albie, what I can't work out is if you think they should go or not.
It doesn't matter what I think.
It does.
No, it doesn't,
does.
because it's about what the Prime Minister's going to do. He said he's not going to resign. So what I think about it or what you think about it doesn't really matter. What matters is what the opinions of the Conservative MPs are, because ultimately the only mechanism to get rid of this Prime Minister is if 54 letters go into the 1922 committee.
Well,
and I am not sure if that's going to happen under these circumstances.
That's probably unlikely to happen, but even if it did, that only leads to a vote, which a lot of the experts say, well, he'd win that anyway. I mean, if those 54 letters don't make him go, do they? They just trigger a vote.
I think you'd be surprised. Let's have a look and see what happens after the May elections, which are, of course, coming up on May the 5th.
They're going to be disastrous for the Tories.
They are going to be disastrous for the Tories, but what MPs care more about than Boris Johnson is the safety of their seats. So when their seats start coming under threat, if Boris Johnson is an electoral asset, you can bet it that they might be having second thoughts about whether or not Boris Johnson is the right man to lead them to victory in the next general election, whenever that will be.
What about the pressure on the Chancellor? Because, I mean, he's not leading them, and he doesn't like he's ever going to lead them now, and he's a very rich man with other priorities, it would seem. Is he just going to go?
I think there is a lot of pressure on the Chancellor. There are a lot of people yesterday speculating that he might resign and say it was the honourable thing to do and then therefore put the Prime Minister in a difficult situation. That hasn't come to pass. I do think his future prospects as leader of the party now are limited, given that he's tarnished from the same brush with Partygate as Boris and then all of the other things that happened with his wife's tax affairs. So I think his future as a potential leader of the party are uncertain. I think probably my bets would be on Liz Truss from current cabinet members.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, Rishi was the obvious contender for the job and isn't now. Liz Truss is probably the only other name that any of us really know as a serious contender. There must be others.
But this is what Tom was saying, is that obviously in all of the Tory leadership elections, there are front-runners and they actually very rarely win. I would be looking at people, maybe some people on the backbenches or maybe on the fringes of cabinet. Someone like Penny Mordaunt is someone who seems to come up time and time again. She seems to have found a niche as being both a one-nation Conservative, but also a very, very big supporter of Brexit. So perhaps that's someone who could bring the entire party together. Other contenders, people like Nadhim Zahawi, who was obviously the Vaccines Minister, now Education Secretary, looking very popular. Ben Wallace has had a very good war and has kind of emerged from a period of not really being very known to someone that's a very prominent figure in the cabinet and seen as handling the Ukraine crisis very well. So I wouldn't necessarily say, well, we all know who Liz Truss is, therefore she's going to be the next Prime Minister. It tends to be with these Tory leadership elections, people on the fringes tend to win.
It's going to be interesting to see who, I mean, whenever this may happen, and so we're not thinking, it's very unlikely it's going to happen anytime soon. But it's how they rally the troops behind them. What message do the backbenchers want to hear?
I think the message the backbenchers want to hear is that this is a Prime Minister who's going to get on with the things that he promised at the last general election, things like levelling up. But then, of course, there are other problems, like the fact that we've raised taxes to the highest levels since the early 20th century. Very unconservative thing to do. So I think they want a message that taxes are going to come down so the economy can grow, so that people like you and I and everyone watching have got more money in their pockets so they can decide how they want to spend it. Policies like that are what Conservative backbenchers want to hear from the Prime Minister, and that they hope that that's going to keep them their seats at the next general election.
So the timeline is the next elections, we have agreed, will probably be pretty disastrous for the Tories. Then
the May elections will be disastrous. The next general election might not be, because, of course, that's a number of years away.
There's time to change policies. There's even time to change leader and chancellor before then, isn't there? So they're playing the long game now, aren't they?
Yes, I think they are playing the long game. I think it's factored in that the May local elections are not going to go very well. We'll just have to see what happens over the next couple of weeks with more Partygate fines coming out. I think the Prime Minister's being investigated for 6 of them. The Sue Gray report's still yet to come out.
I can't believe that we're still waiting.
I know, we're still waiting for Sue Gray.
Now.
It's like waiting for Godot.
Yeah. OK, look, Albie and Corona, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. It is 6:15. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories.
Well, as we've just been hearing, both the Prime Minister, his wife and the Chancellor have paid fines for breaching COVID restrictions by attending Boris Johnson's birthday party in June 2020. The Prime Minister said it actually didn't occur to him that the gathering would be breaking the rules. So both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have both apologised now.
The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced at the Old Bailey today. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. Mr Justice Sweeney could impose a whole life sentence, meaning Ali would never be released.
Over a third of GPs plan to quit in the next 5 years. New figures from the GP Work Life Survey found that nearly half of family doctors are not satisfied with their job, citing increasing workloads, demands from patients, and not having enough time to do the work properly.
You see, your thoughts on the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are fascinating this morning because they're so split. It makes it very difficult to judge what you all think, which is why you need to get in touch this morning. Mark has been in touch. Morning, Mark says, stop trying to make having a bit of cake and a glass of wine on his birthday such a dreadful crime. Yes, he told the public not to mix, but they were working together. They've paid fines. Get over it. Stop trying to make it the crime of the year.
That's what you talk about it being a crime. It seems awful that just being ambushed by a birthday cake in the cabinet room is a crime. And I'm pretty sure, and Rishi apparently wasn't going there for a birthday party. He was going there for a meeting with the Prime Minister, and somebody just got out a cake. It does seem amazing to call it a crime. On the other hand, you know, people were considered criminals and fined for doing less, I suppose, during that very time.
Well, for doing less, though, were they?
I don't know.
I don't know. Bruce says one rule for Boris and chums, another for everyone else. It will be brushed under the carpet now Boris considers himself a war hero. What a total disgrace, with the wool pulled over the country's eyes.
And Larry says it's not about the parties or the fines, it's about Boris lying to Parliament and the British people. He's got to go, no one trusts him.
Yeah, Paul says, I'm not in the least bit interested in whether stressed-out civil servants having a little drink and cake to let their hair down, whether it happened. I'm more interested in what they're doing about the current crisis at home and abroad. They've paid their fines, apologised, so let them get on with sorting out the more important things.
There are so many important things that we need a Prime Minister and a Chancellor to sort out.
Plus, you've got to say, I mean, as we've lived through a fair few of them, Conservative leadership elections are not a fast or pleasant process.
No, they're very unpleasant.
And you just think, now?
Yeah.
Really? Now? I mean, look...
We need a sense of stability, don't we?
If the PM turned around and said, look, I'm not, I'm going to be stepping down at the next general election, you could go, OK, fair enough. But then would it become lame duck?
Yes. Yes, he would.
No, it's very difficult. But, I mean, I don't know. Whatever your views are on that, GBviews at gbnews.uk, because it's a difficult one to work out what the consensus of the great British public is on this one.
There probably isn't a consensus, because it's not an easy one, is it? Some people hate him. I mean, you only have to look at the front pages of the newspapers. They're so polarised at the moment. And Labour are calling for, they're calling for mass resignations by the sound of it. They're really calling for a general election, but they ain't going to get one, are they?
No, I mean, not now. Surely not now. Well, look, keep your thoughts coming through. We'll bring you the very latest on Partygate. Can you believe we're talking about it again? First, let's have a look at the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm, but also unstable. And that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
6:24, good morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the UK on both your TV and your radio.
Well, still to come on today's programme, we're going to be talking about President Biden's comments after he accused Russia of committing genocide in Ukraine.
And just before 7 o'clock, we'll be talking about the return of budget airline Flybe, which will be resuming flights today 2 years after the firm collapsed. We're going to be speaking to a travel expert who has the latest on the airport chaos that's been taking place all over the holidays and for Easter coming up.
I just want to say, because I haven't got access to our GB News Twitter. I don't know who does that, someone out in the office. So I've just put a quick poll on my Twitter, which is Stephen GB News. And it's about the Partygate thing, just to see where you lie. Should the Prime Minister stay or go, is what I've asked. I mean, we've got 31 votes. I only put it up a minute ago. 52% go, 48% stay.
Yeah,
at the referendum.
Yes, exactly. It really is, isn't it?
But it's a quick way to get, hopefully, a few hundred responses. I mean, just get a general sense. I mean, I know it's not scientific, but it'd be just interesting to get your thoughts on that. So have a look on Twitter and have a vote.
Yeah. First of all, though, New York police are hunting for a gunman who set off 2 smoke bombs and then opened fire in a subway train, injuring more than 20 people.
Now, the police commissioner said the attack is not currently being investigated as a terrorist act, but they're not ruling out anything as the motive is still unclear. Officials are appealing for information on the gunman, who they believe to have acted alone and is still at large. Well, let's talk to Haven Orecchio-Egrizitz, a senior criminal justice reporter at Insider. Morning to you, good to see you. Look, are we getting any clarity about what happened and why?
Well, police have not named a suspect in the shooting, but they have identified a person of interest. They are calling him Frank James. He's a 62-year-old man with addresses in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. So essentially, they found belongings that they believed to be of the gunman at the station. And among those belongings were keys to a U-Haul van. That U-Haul van was rented by Mr. James in Philadelphia. So they're searching for him now. There are police and uniformed officers at every subway station, almost on every corner in New York and the greater metro area. And of course, it was just a chaotic day in New York with people terrified to ride the subways.
Right, we think that he left behind his rucksack, but he's still got a gun.
I'm not sure what he has on him at the moment. Police have not said that, but they have said that he is believed to be dangerous and told New Yorkers to be alert yesterday as they were, moving around the city.
Oh, it's hugely concerning. What do we know about the condition of those who were injured?
So there were 5 people critically injured. As you said, nearly 24 people were injured. Though there were 5 people who were critically injured, they don't believe that those are life-threatening injuries. Many of the injuries were also related to smoke inhalation and part of just the chaos of trying to flee this really crowded station during rush hours. 10 people had gunshot wounds.
I mean, at the moment, not knowing where he is transport being disrupted? Is the subway still running? I can imagine people will be terrified to get on it.
Yes, people are terrified to get on it, but it's the main form of transportation for many New Yorkers. So, for example, I spoke with a nurse this afternoon who spent hours waiting outside a school that was just outside of the barrier, the police barrier near the subway station for her son. She said that she takes the subway every day, multiple times a day, to get to her patients, and her children also take the subway multiple times a day. And although she doesn't want them taking the subway, of course, especially during the manhunt and an overall increase in subway crime, there's not really another option for them in the places that they have to get to quickly.
I mean, the police may not be saying this is a terrorist attack at the moment, but anything like this it reopens some horrific wounds for New Yorkers, doesn't it? I mean, this must be affecting the whole city.
Oh, absolutely. It reopens wounds about not necessarily just terrorism, but I think it's a fear of a lot of New Yorkers who ride subway stations knowing that there's not anywhere to go if someone were to pull out a knife or pull out a gun. So really, it was a nightmare come true for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I suppose, as you say, the police obviously aren't saying if they've got any clues, but since they know who he is and they know that he had a U-Haul van, there might be some... I suppose we just don't know, do we, how soon they may make an arrest or at least find him.
No, we don't. Going through a YouTube account believed to be belong to this person of interest, there were many long rants related to news of the day. There was a lot of bigoted ideas related to women and Black women and crime. It's unclear what his motive was for this specific crime, but it seems like he may have struggled with some emotional issues.
Yeah, oh, well, look, I know you'll keep us up to date with that. Haven Arechi-Igrazidze, thanks very much indeed for that update. Horrific situation.
It is, it's awful, because he could do anything, he could be anywhere.
Let's hope he gets tracked down. If
Very
it is this person of interest, anyway, so they haven't named him as the suspect as such, but they seem very keen to talk to this particular person. Just want to bring you an update on my poll.
On your poll?
On your poll. 9 minutes in, I've had 280 votes.
Ooh.
Should he stay? 70%. Should he go? 30% at the moment.
That's interesting. It's swinging.
It's swinging. Yeah. Stephen, GBNews for that one. I don't normally tweet work stuff on there, but there you go.
I think the interesting thing is that the dilemma has slightly changed for people because Rishi Sunak is now implicated too, or I mean, he's been found guilty too, of breaking the law, breaking those lockdown rules. And that means the obvious successor that people might have found, get rid of Boris Johnson, but at least we've got Rishi Sunak now, whose popularity is waning fast. That option is no longer there. And I think a lot of Tory voters will probably think, actually, maybe not get rid of either of them and just let them get on with the job. And judge them on their job, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe that's the way forward. Well, it's going to make for an interesting pay-per-view because former Conservative Minister David Mellor will be joining us along with Claire Muldoon. So don't go away.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.6:33 even. Welcome
Well, it's
back.
very nearly 6:30.
Very nearly,
Very
yes.
long
I
enough.
wasn't far out. This is...
Well, in fact, if
I'm
you
getting
just
corrected
keep this
on all
conversation
sides.
going just a little longer,
Ever so slightly longer.
Stephen will have been right
There
all
you
along.
go. I'm never wrong for long. There you go. Let's bring it up to
Like
date
a
with the
stopped
headlines.
clock.
Yeah. The Prime Minister, his wife and the Chancellor have paid fines for breaching COVID restrictions by attending the PM's birthday party in June 2020. The Prime Minister said it didn't occur to him that the gathering would be breaking the rules. The PM and the Chancellor have both apologised.
The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced at the Old Bailey today. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. And the judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, could impose a whole life sentence, meaning that Ali would never be released.
Police in New York are searching for a man thought to be responsible for yesterday's shooting at a subway station in Brooklyn, which injured more than 20. The person of interest is 62-year-old Frank James, who fled the scene after allegedly setting off smoke bombs and opening fire, hitting 10 people.
The EasyJet boss has said hold-ups with security checks on new airline crew has led to flight cancellations. It's scrapped hundreds of journeys in recent days. The chief executive says it's waiting for the Department of Transport to give permission to around 100 new staff to start work.
Figures show households in the UK would need to earn £80 a week more to be able to save at the same level as last spring. Weekly savings are expected to fall by 71% to an average of £26 in May and June because of rising inflation and those ever-rising prices.
Who is managing to save at the moment, anyway?
It's really, really tough. isn't it? It's really tough. As well as if you can say, if you're paying into a
Surviving, not
pension,
saving.
then that's saving.
Yes, I suppose that's
That might have to be enough if you can afford to do that. It's terrible. Let's go through the papers for you this morning. Former Conservative politician, Minister David Mellor and broadcaster Claire Muldoon are both here. Lovely to see you both. Oh, good timing, David, having you in today, I should think.
Chelsea.
We're not with Chelsea,
no.
no.
We're not thinking of
We're not
Chelsea.
talking Chelsea.
But I want to talk.
Well,
We'll talk Chelsea
Do I
later.
want to talk about the shambles in Whitehall? At least Chelsea lost honourably as well.
Yeah.
Well,
The government are losing badly.
What should happen honourably with number 10 and number 11 then?
Well, the papers tell us that there's no great enthusiasm for getting rid of Boris. And, of course, it's an ill wind that blows nobody good. And, I mean, it's an awful thing to suggest. But, you see, Ukraine has given Boris a chance to have a good war. And it was rather moving, actually. He walks through the streets of Kiev and he has managed to project Britain as the principal friends of Ukraine, whereas the Germans, you know, as a lot of the papers report, the president of Germany, who is one of the architects of Germany's let's grovel around Putin's backside policy, he's told he isn't welcome.
Yeah.
And, you know, for all that the Partygate thing is pretty sick-making, you know, it is sick-making, I think we've all had enough of it now. And that seems to be generally what the papers say. Boris says people have the right to expect better in the Daily Telegraph. Well, you know, they do. But will that make any difference to Boris? I think Boris is one of those people that can't help himself, really. I think in the Times, opponents decide timing is not right for a leadership challenge. You know, timing is everything in politics.
Yeah, but
3 months ago, he'd have been dead. Today, he's alive and well. But that doesn't mean that Boris won't get himself into big trouble because, you know, this business with the police, you know, what was it? Brendan Behan, the Irish playwright, said, "There's no situation so terrible that a policeman can't make it worse." And this idea that the police are going to be coming out every week or two with more reports from various parties. I mean, how much of this can we take?
But, David, the police are only implementing the laws that the government put in force at the time of the lockdown. I'm not trying to minimise anything that number 10 or number 11 have done. However, there's a tranche of findings in Sue Gray's report that's been heavily redacted that we don't know that the background story of it, which is supposed to be published in full, I hope, next week. And it's saying there's no news and no good news for Boris in this either.
No, I'm sure.
You know, Boris has been, the Prime Minister has been covered with the war that I think he's done a very good job on, actually, to be fair with you, in the Ukraine. He's been a diplomat, he's been a forward-thinking leader, he's been a helper and an aide and a close ally of the Ukraine against Putin's Russia. But when the opposition of this country say, you should resign, I'm sorry, I'm not with them, I don't hold that, because there is no opposition in this country, I don't think.
Actually, one of our viewers has said exactly that. But when you call for him to resign, you've got to think of the alternative. Is it that one? No.
There is one saying that. But there's also
Yeah, here we are. Sandra says, hello, Sandra. People screaming for his resignation need to sit down and think of the alternative. Starmer.
And Debbie says, I don't know what you make of this one, but Starmer's OK to have dinner and drinks after a work meeting and he's not fined. Boris was presented with a cake and this is called a party.
I mean, yes, I mean, I think, while I think, you know, when I think of my 9 years as a minister under Margaret Thatcher, if I'd turned up with a bottle of cheap plonk and settled myself down in the garden number 10, my reign as a minister would have been very short. But, you know, Boris runs a sort of fairly free and easy. You know, Boris would have been great in America during Prohibition. He'd run the best speakeasy in town. But at the end of it all, we've had enough of this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we deserve better, actually, don't we?
Yeah.
Maybe to change the narrative, I don't know.
Well, we've got the polls coming up on the 5th of May for the local elections. And if there's anyone out there that is thinking, oh, I can't be bothered to vote, if you don't vote, you can't complain. You need to vote with your feet, go to the polling station or do it by proxy via mail. Vote and let your voice be heard. It's so imperative, so important.
See, the Daily Mail, which is often, I mean, the barometer of where Conservative opinion is, have a very interesting leader where they, you know, call time on Partygate and let us all move on. And I think that's probably where we've got to. It's interesting, too. that they are having a really serious go at the police. We must also look, this is what the Mail says, at what motivates Scotland Yard to dribble out these fine notifications in such a piecemeal fashion.
It is, and that's
the police
just irritating.
should never have been involved in the first place, but now they are. The least they can do is get their chin stroking over with and get out.
What about the Chancellor in all of this? Because this has come after, a very, very bad week for him.
Yeah.
Could this be the nail in his coffin?
I think his position has become untenable. I really, really do. I mean, he's a teetotaler. There'd be no thought that he was engaging in anything improper at the party. He's not a man that takes risks either, I don't think. However, I do think his position has become untenable. He has held a green card whilst a member of the British government. Where is this non-dom status story going to end with his wife, who we know has done no wrong? It's not illegal. But faced with the grim reality that every single citizen of the Great Britain is facing at the moment, I think the court of public opinion has had enough. And I think the public opinion will say, no, I'm sorry, we don't want any of you. Please just change the ropes. But I don't think necessarily a change of government, but I wonder who could actually take the mantle up.
See, the amusing thing, actually, if you like amusement about political comment, is Boris was the one who, cakeism, he wanted to have his cake and eat it. But the person who's really been having his cake and eat it is Rishi Sunak. Because Rishi Sunak has been, living off his wife's earnings, and his wife, although the wife of the British Chancellor and an aspirant British Prime Minister, is a non-dom. She's still an Indian citizen. Now, this is called having your cake and eat it. And what I find extraordinary, and this is what, a lot of us thought, well, Rishi Sunak is matured very quickly, but the truth is he hasn't. How anybody could have thought that his wife's non-dom status could have survived all of this without exposing him to humiliation. And the awful thing is that he doesn't get it still. He thinks the real issue here is the leaks, and the papers are full of that. But it isn't the leaks, it's the fact that he thinks, as a would-be Prime Minister and as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, his wife can be allegedly based abroad and he can lead a billionaire's lifestyle on his wife's earnings without any political bribe.
Is that naivety or cynicism?
It's a good question. I think probably with him it may be naivety, but it could be a bit of cynicism.
Because I looked at that, I think, why didn't somebody think about, when he actually became Chancellor, let alone maybe before, why didn't he think of that? Why didn't they both sit down with some strategist and think it through?
The Conservative committee, the Conservative MPs themselves would have known this in any event, because they would have to have known for it to be leaked in this first instance.
So is this the character...
There are only a few people.
Is this the character of the people in our cabinet at the moment? People who think
is.
that's okay?
I think it is, and I think that that's reflected in the news stories that are being seeped out, that are being leaked out, that are being brought out. This is the state of our country.
Well, and coming back, to the Telegraph, people have the right to expect better. This is what Boris has said. It's all over the Telegraph front page. They do have a right to expect better. The question is Boris capable of delivering better?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Oh, well, it's an interesting one. Down on my Twitter poll, should he stay? This is the PM only, 72%. Should he go, 28%?
Yeah.
Your thoughts? There's about 514 people voted so far. Let's look at the Times. Some people emailing in saying he should stay because we've got better things to worry about, including inflation, Claire, in the Times.
So workers hit in the pocket after inflation reaches a 30-year high. The average UK wage earner is £556 a week, and that is before any bonuses or anything, which doesn't reflect either on the low level of unemployment at the moment, but even those figures are skewed. You can take a figure, you can manipulate it, you can give a narrative to a statistic any way that you want. Unemployment figures are down, yes, but that's because there's over 500,000 people left jobs during the pandemic, through the pandemic, and a lot of people are actually off work ill. So these statistics, I wouldn't say, are representative at all of what's happening in the economy. We know that the cost of living is rising. We know that the governor, the chairman of the Bank of England, has told everybody to refrain from taking a pay increase because what is inflation? It's too much money chasing too few goods. And it's supply and demand. It's basic economics. We've all been here before. However, you would think that people could still afford to live. You would think in this day and age that people could still be able to live. But unfortunately, the stories, the narratives, the rhetoric is somewhat reflecting a Britain that is completely broken.
And here we have
cannot work.
Here's where the Conservative Party may have reason to regret the survival of Boris Johnson, because Boris is having a good war. But the one thing Boris is going to be totally and cataclysmically hopeless at is handling an economy that's in serious decline, because Boris is not a believer in traditional Conservative remedies.
No, he's not.
Of actually restraining public expenditure and things like that. As next Chief Secretary of the Treasury, it appalls me the way that money is thrown after every problem. And what he doesn't seem to realise, if that had been the answer to Britain's problems, there'd be statues to Harold Wilson and Dennis Healey in every village in this country. But Boris is, Boris is pretty reckless when it comes to spending money.
What if he reshuffles and replaces Rishi Sunak anyway?
Well, who would he have? They talk about Liz Truss. I mean, Liz Truss does a nice sort of Margaret Thatcher impression. I feel the Margaret Thatcher impression is probably only skin deep, having known both of them. But the point is, Sunak, for all his faults, does have a grasp of economics. Who else does in that lot,
Don't know.
I don't know. That's a really horrible question to ask, actually, isn't it? Because none of us can grab immediately at somebody. But that's who we need, don't we? We need a charismatic Chancellor who knows what he's doing.
There must be someone.
We thought it was Rishi Sunak, but as you
apply
said,
here, we should perhaps say.
Well, yes.
Apply to B. Johnson, 10 Downing Street, London SW1, folks. Don't forget that.
Look, David, Claire, thank you. We'll catch up with you both a little bit later on. At 6:48, let's run you through the headlines this morning.
The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amos will be sentenced at the Old Bailey today. Ali Habib Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. The judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, could impose a whole life sentence, meaning Ali never be released.
Police in New York are searching for a man thought to be responsible for yesterday's shooting at a subway station in Brooklyn, which injured more than 20 people. The person of interest is 62-year-old Frank James, who police think fled the scene after setting off smoke bombs and opening fire, hitting 10 people directly.
Wayne Couzens is set to appear in court today, charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure. The alleged incidents are said to have taken place in Kent in the first 2 months of last year. He is, of course, serving a whole life sentence now for killing 33-year-old Sarah Everard in March last year, when he was a serving Met police officer.
Prince Charles is calling on us all to buy certified ocean-friendly products when we go shopping. The Prince of Wales made a speech at Our Ocean Conference, warning that the current threat to sea life is dire. He says we need to tackle the problem of plastic pollution on a massive scale.
Today, the UK airline Flybe, do you remember it? Will be starting operations and resuming flights 2 years after the airline collapsed. Flybe was pushed into administration in March 2020 with the loss of 2,500 jobs as the COVID pandemic destroyed large parts of the travel market.
Well, let's talk to head of the Points Guy UK, Nikki Kelvin, who joins us in the studio. I mean, this is remarkable, isn't it, to see, in the current times, to see the return of a small airline?
I think it's really exciting. We're all looking for those signals that travel is back, and you've only got to look at what airports look like today and what they're going to be like over the weekend. But an airline returning that's been gone for just over 2 years is really exciting and a really good signal for travel.
What's happened to it? It went into administration and presumably has been bubbling under as a potential company for the last 2 years.
So Flybe went into administration, and this is a whole new iteration. They're sort of calling it Flybe 2. So it's new people, new base. and they're going to try and recapture some of the routes. It's all about initially domestic connectivity, which was a lot of what Flybe did before. They were the biggest domestic operator by seats and by routes, and so that's what they're trying to recapture. But it is a whole new entity.
Is there an appetite for that? I mean, for domestic travel, especially with all the green agenda, which a lot of people do disagree with it, but a lot of people do agree with it. You know, and the idea of domestic flights has become, I would suggest, a little bit unpopular.
It's a really interesting point, and that's going to be really fascinating to see how Flybe are received. Actually, some airlines came in and replaced some of the routes that Flybe were flying, and they've been doing okay, airlines like Logan Air and Eastern Airways. And so Flybe's actually got some competition there. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But, you know, with train fares going up, if you look on the Flybe website, these flights are quite cheap. The first flights today from Birmingham to Belfast were selling for about £30. And I'm from Leeds, and they're launching a Leeds route. British Airways cancelled that route, so it's exciting for me. And those flights are about 40 quid. And, you know, the train on the same day can be £100. So
on the other hand, if there's still chaos at airports, we're told for at least another year, then your journey, which would be quicker by air, is going to be massively long because you're still going to be queuing at an airport.
Absolutely, and I would not want to be turning up to Heathrow today just to get to Leeds, but hopefully in a few weeks that might improve. I'm actually going to race. We're going to do a race from train versus plane and see how that pans out in a few weeks, because they launched the route at the end of the month up to Leeds. So we're going to see what that ends up like.
That would be very interesting, actually. We'll have to keep in touch with you on that.
I mean, in terms of where we are in the market, I mean, whether it's on the domestic front or whether Flybe managed to extend to the sort of short-haul routes as well, is there an appetite for competition at the moment? Because obviously airlines are really struggling financially because of the pandemic. Is there much of an appetite for a bit of a price war?
A price war, I don't know. I think airlines are ready to fight for business, and I think passengers are ready to fly and get away. People are desperate for holidays.
I mean, the chaos that's going on at the moment proves that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
The minute travel restrictions pulled back, people wanted to go on their holidays again. And we thought the pandemic might change people's minds, but actually it hasn't.
No, and we've been talking for the last couple of years, trying to anticipate what are the public going to want, and it's very, very clear that people are desperate. Bookings are up hundreds of percents on what they looked like a couple of years ago, and we're almost actually at pre-pandemic levels in terms of the amount of passengers travelling.
What does this mean for smaller airports? I'm quite intrigued by the domestic issue and the smaller airports, because a lot of people have used in the past smaller airports, but a lot of them are struggling in places like Blackpool, which shut down a few years ago, which was a fantastic little airport.
Yeah.
Could we see a resurgence with the airline? Could we see a resurgence in some of these smaller local airports as well?
It's an interesting point. I'm not sure the super small ones are going to become popular. I think we'll definitely see a bigger focus on airports like Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Birmingham. So those sort of the major cities outside of London. I think a focus on those airports we're going to see. And we're already seeing airlines like Virgin Atlantic deciding to have direct flights out of Manchester and out of Scottish airports again to holiday destinations like Orlando and Barbados. So we're already seeing a focus there. Can I see much smaller regional airports opening? I'm not sure that's in the works for now.
Okay, I don't know, the way my family are talking, they're sort of thinking the way to avoid the chaos at the moment is to choose your airport. And, you know, and instead of just thinking what's the cheapest way to get to XYZ, is actually what's the more convenient way. And if you went for a much more local airport, would there be the same chaos?
East Midlands is fairly quiet at the moment, which is pretty good. Look, Nikki, it's really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. If you fancy getting on a domestic flight, let us know what you think. You're all talking about Boris and Rishi this morning. Tony, morning Tony, says Boris and Rishi must now go. They're toxic brands as far as the public are concerned. The Tories are finished.
Don't think so. They're playing the long game. They really are. Lindsay says, what a lovely start to the day. The national anthem and wonderful views of Great Britain. It's the first time I've seen it. Yes, at 6 o'clock. It is spectacular, I have to say. It's lovely. And Anne and Stephen, for a second, I thought it was a Friday. As for Boris, for God's sake, leave him to do his job.
Yeah, it's interesting. Scott says, define a party. Starmer had a pizza and a bottle of lager with colleagues in the workplace, which is not a party. Boris had a cake and wine. Well, apparently the cake didn't come out the Tupperware box. And it is a party.
Yeah.
Not sure this stacks up for me.
It doesn't sound to me as though it was a party. It's just somebody saying, we're already working here and it's Boris's birthday. Get out the Tupperware cake, which apparently stayed in there. And they only stayed for a few minutes. So should they have shut it down? Yes, of course they should have, but they didn't think to. And maybe that's understandable.
Yeah, lots more on this coming up in just a moment. Stay with us.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak apologise for lockdown breaches amid growing calls for them to resign.
Good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock on Wednesday, April the 13th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across your TV, your radio and online. Here's what's leading the news today.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor have apologised and paid fines issued to them for breaches of lockdown laws. Despite growing calls for him to resign, Boris Johnson said last night he just wanted to get on and deliver the mandate he had. We'll be live from Rishi Sunak's constituency of Richmond in a moment to see what people there make of it all.
More than 20 people in New York have been injured after a gunman wearing a gas mask detonated smoke grenades and opened fire on morning commuters. A manhunt is currently underway after the shooter fled the scene.
President Biden has accused Russia of committing genocide in Ukraine. Speaking at an event last night, he said Putin was trying to wipe out the idea of even being Ukrainian.
And you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet at gbnews. And Stephen's got a Twitter poll going.
Oh, I have got a Twitter poll going on my Twitter.
On whether they should resign.
Stephen GB News. 830 votes so far. Should he stay? 66%. This is just about the PM. Should he go? 34%.
You're just asking about Boris Johnson.
This is just about Boris Johnson at the moment. I just sort of try and simplify it a little bit. It's not scientific, of course, but you can have your side. I just thought it was a good way of getting hold of a few hundred views rather than...
A few hundred, 800 already.
Yes,
really
not bad.
Going. Yeah.
Not bad. So you can have your say there, and email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to run through a lot of your views in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Anthony says Partygate is an irrelevance. The real problems are higher taxes, the net zero recession and uncontrolled illegal immigration. All the work of Boris Johnson.
Well,
that's a strong view.
It is a strong view. Well, the PM and the Chancellor are amongst 50 people issued fines by the Met over lockdown breaches.
Yes, both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have apologised for their breaches, with the Prime Minister himself saying it didn't occur to him that the gathering that he was at for his birthday in June was a violation of the rules, and then asked if he would resign. He responded like this.
I want to be able to get on and deliver the mandate that I have, but also to tackle the problems that the country must face right now, and to make sure that we get on with delivering for the people of this country. That is my priority.
Well, the Labour leader Keir Starmer joined the growing chorus of voices pushing for Johnson to resign, saying the Conservatives are totally unfit to govern.
Well, let's head to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's in Downing Street for us this morning, where, I mean, there's a huge amount of pressure mounting on number 10 and number 11 today, Tom, but it seems both men are wanting to be pretty resilient.
That's certainly right. We're in a state of almost limbo right now. Parliament is in recess, not returning till the middle of next week. Of course, we've got the Easter holidays coming up, starting on Friday. And, of course, the Prime Minister is not currently in the building behind me, but at Chequers as well, having a bit of respite with his family after returning from Kiev over the weekend. Really, what we're seeing now is a situation where that sort of heated crucible that we felt just several months ago, where everything seemed to be on a precipice, where the Prime Minister's leadership seemed to be on the brink. Well, that temperature has simply not returned this time round. Could it be that Parliament is away? Could it be that there are bigger things on the agenda, that there's a changed international situation? Potentially, although the potential for the temperature in Parliament to rise still remains. Because, of course, when Parliament returns next week, when the Prime Minister attends Prime Minister's questions at midday on Wednesday, this will certainly be a big point of conversation. And, of course, the Metropolitan Police have not yet said that their investigation is concluded. There could yet still be more fines coming down the track, more fixed penalty notices being issued from the Metropolitan Police. So if this becomes a drip, drip, drip of further events, of further stories, it might not be that people get tired of it. It might well be that this seems more serious. Of course, the event that we're all discussing today didn't seem to be the most particularly serious allegation in the roster of events that has been discussed over the last several months of this scandal. This particular event was something that was actually reported at the time, that many people didn't seem to mind at the time, that certainly Number 10 didn't seem to think was against the rules at the time, having briefed it out to journalists. But potentially this could get more difficult for the Prime Minister if further fines come down the line. And that's the potential, because that investigation from the Metropolitan Police is still open. Only at the time that that investigation closes will Sue Gray's full report be able to be published, and at that point the Prime Minister has said he will come and give a full and frank explanation to the House of Commons.
So, Totten, the lights may be on in Downing Street, but nobody's home.
Well, the building behind me, and this is one of the problems about this whole scandal, this is not just a house, it's not just two flats where the Prime Minister and the Chancellor live, it's also a bustling workplace of over 100 offices, of many staff with twists and tunnels. It's all knocked through behind me as well. There's number 9, there's number 10, there's number 11, there's even number 12 over there out of shot, and of course it connects through to Whitehall as well. This is a sprawling palace of both a place of someone's home, but also a workplace. And so, yes, there are many people working there behind me today. The Prime Minister off in Chequers, of course, but this is part of the problem of this whole situation. When the Prime Minister told people to stay at home, that's exactly what he was doing, but other people were working in his home as well. And where do you draw the line between what goes on in someone's house and what goes on in workplaces? If you're mixing with these people every day for legitimate work purposes, at what point does a meeting turn into a party if someone cracks out a bottle of wine at the end of that particular meeting? There's clearly a lot of grey lines here, because what's happened over the course of the last few months is an extensive investigation. The fact that these were not an open and shut set of cases, the fact that the Metropolitan Police has taken time to determine whether or not individuals broke the law, may well be leading to the situation whereby these are not open and shut places, where these are somehow more of a grey area, and potentially that's why the Metropolitan Police is taking quite so much time going through all of this. But as I say, still more to come.
OK, Tom, thank you. Let's head to Anna Riley, who's in Rishi Sunak's constituency of Richmond, has been talking to people, oh, there you are, talking to people there about the latest revelations. And Anna, I mean, he's certainly, within his constituency association, a very popular member of Parliament. Is there a sense there that they want to keep him on?
Good morning, Stephen and Anne. Yes, he has been in his seat since 2015. Richmond is a real strong Conservative seat. There's been a Conservative here for the last 100 years. But there's been some real mixed opinions about Rishi Sunak's fine for breaking the rules during lockdown. Some people have said he needs to resign. Other people have said, you know, there's more important things in their opinion going on at the moment, like the war in Ukraine. So he has offered this unreserved apology as Mr Sunak, but this is what people in the constituency of Richmond had to say.
Sunak should go now. I don't suppose they will, but that's my opinion. I think they should have gone.
They've done the crime, now they're having to pay the fine.
We all have parties when we shouldn't, and God, it's in the past. We have to look for the future, hopefully.
I just think it's an absolute disgrace, really, when everybody else was sort of going by the rules, and we all lost people at some point during that last 2 years, and none of us could do anything about it. We couldn't see our people or anything like that, and I personally had my mum's funeral, and we couldn't have very many people at the funeral, and the Queen's there with nobody at her funeral for her husband, so it's just an absolute disgrace while they felt they could party on while none of us could.
My view is I understand fully why people are really annoyed with the situation, but to be honest, I mean, if there was 20,000 fined, and I've watched his explanation on the television, is that there's much bigger things currently, I'm afraid, we should be getting on without destabilising the country at this time.
So, as well as there being a divide across the UK as to whether Boris and Rishi Sunak should resign, even here in Rishi's constituency of Richmond, people have mixed opinions on the Partygate fines and the next steps for Rishi Sunak.
Yes, indeed, lots of mixed opinions. Thanks very much indeed for that. How are the mixed opinions going on your poll?
Yes.
Stephen's been running his own poll this morning.
Yes, running a little poll on Stephen GBNews on Twitter. 1,100 votes so far. Should he stay? 67%. This is about the PM, really. Should he stay? 67%. Should he go? 33%. So have your say on that. Let's see what former Conservative Party MP Michael Brown makes of it all. Michael, what do you reckon?
What do you make of it all? Solve it for us, please.
And if I was a political journalist, I would be writing and saying, he's got to go. If I was a Tory voter, which I still am, my hand only knows how to vote against or in favour of the Conservative Party against Labour. If I was a Tory MP, as I was when we faced a situation in 1990 when we unilaterally decided, not me, but my colleagues decided that it was time for Margaret Thatcher to go. In all of this, if you're a Tory MP, you really need the voters, finally, to pass their judgment. And I would be a Tory MP today, even if I was angry, as I am with what Boris has done over Partygate, I would say to myself, this is not the moment to change the Prime Minister. And I suspect that most Tory MPs, even those who put in letters, will stay their hand, at least until we have the first judgment of the voters at the ballot box, which will be 3 weeks, I think, tomorrow.
And we know
that's
not going to be good for the Tories. It won't be a good local election, will it?
The test to look out for, I think, Anne, is Wandsworth and Westminster in the London borough elections. Those two councils have always held out against Labour, even when there's a swing to Labour. I will be, if I was still a Tory MP, extremely nervous at those local elections. Yeah. But I think time is on Boris's side. He can parry the local elections and say, well, every incumbent Prime Minister has bad local elections. He can still say, let's wait for Sue Gray. At the end of the day, I'm always very uncomfortable in a democracy with journalists, the sheer weight of the media, and even though I note the poll that you've just put out to your viewers, at the end of the day, I think voters are the ones who should hire and fire a Prime Minister.
A lot of people say, well, look, there's bigger things to worry about now. And we have just, as well as what's going on in Ukraine, obviously very important, but the cost of living crisis. And we've just heard, we've got the new inflation figures out, 7%. That's a 30-year high.
It wasn't long ago that the three of us were talking about inflation touching 10%, and that's going to certainly happen. I think that ultimately is going to be what the voters will judge our politicians on and will judge Boris Johnson on. If we get to a point, maybe later in the summer, Tory party conference, where it is patently obvious that Boris is on course to lose your seat if you're a red wall Tory MP sitting on a tiny little majority. But I would just point out to you one by-election result that happened in the High Peak constituency, Anne. Last Thursday, High Peak, which returned a Tory MP, gained from Labour with a majority of 500. A Labour seat was lost to the Tories last Thursday, which turned the council from Labour control to no overall control. Equally, on the same day, there was a by-election last Thursday in David Davis's constituency. A massive, safe Tory seat went Liberal Democrat. Now, Boris could argue, well, that's because David Davis said, in the name of God, go. And the Tory voters there are punishing David Davis, not Boris.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And we've been waiting for so long for this Sue Gray report. By the time it comes out, I don't know how much we'll care. But if it comes out in the next week or so, that's just before the May elections, that would be seen as a bit stinky, wouldn't it?
Well, I doubt that's likely to happen, Anne, because we've still got to go through all these other offences that have allegedly been committed inside number 10 Downing Street. So my suspicion is that the local elections will take place before Sue Gray, and even if they're bad, Boris will simply say, this is midterm blues. My hunch is the Houdini of British politics has still yet some more fight in him.
I mean, it is... As I said, it's all about timing. David Mellor earlier on was saying, an old colleague of yours, of course, saying timing is everything in politics. Well, the timing here is playing very much in Boris's favour.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to ask, as I did, when you depose a Prime Minister is, who else is there going to be?
Well, yeah.
I said to you 2 weeks ago that it's not going to be Rishi Sunak, not knowing what was to come. Now, if there's no Rishi Sunak to be Prime Minister, who have you got left? Liz Truss? I mean, she dresses like Margaret Thatcher. She wears a fancy hat when she's in Russia, fur hat. She sits on a tank like Margaret Thatcher. But I would say, to use those famous words from the American senator, Liz Truss, I knew Margaret Thatcher. You're no Margaret Thatcher.
But
So I think Boris gets away because there's no effective alternative Prime Minister.
What about a David Cameron, someone who we weren't aware of just coming up from the ranks?
Well, I suppose if you said to me, go and put, just for fun, an outside bet of £1 on 1,000 to 1, perhaps the Defence Secretary, Wallace, forgotten his Christian name. Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace, his star is rising at the moment. He's had a good war. But I really do think that it's the voters who must hire and fire Prime Minister.
What about you personally? Do you think that inside number 10, which as we know is a TARDIS, I mean, it looks like a terraced house, but it isn't when you get in there, it's a TARDIS. But it is Boris's home, and he was telling people to stay home. It was his home, and there are people around who are working with him all day, every day. Somebody suddenly says, it's your birthday, Boris, let's just put a few candles in this cake and have a glass of wine. Is that a party?
I think it is.
Okay.
Look, I can tell you this. If Margaret Thatcher were still here, she ruled Downing Street from the top, and she would have obeyed, like Her Majesty the Queen, to the letter and expected all her staff, and I'm sure, to be fair, so would Theresa May, his predecessor, Boris's predecessor. No, I think there's no question that Boris's lackadaisical nature, his casual association with rules has permeated Downing Street.
Did
that
he
is a very
knowingly
bad
lie
thing.
to Parliament? When he said, I didn't realise it was a party, you know, it was sort of ambushed. Did he lie to Parliament?
Because as Tom Harwood was telling us, which I'd forgotten about entirely, that event, the cake and the wine, that was pushed to the press. They made no secret of it. They pushed that story out there at the time.
Look, there's no question that throughout Partygate, Boris's loose association with the truth has caught up with him. The blunt truth is, we all knew when the Tory party elected Boris as party leader, we all knew when we voted for him, as I did, with that massive majority that he got, that Boris has a casual association with the truth. I'm not sure whether I can say he does lie, but he certainly doesn't bother too much about rules in the way that the rest of us would, and in the way that people like Theresa May or Margaret Thatcher would have done. There's no question of that, but I don't think he's yet done for.
OK. Michael Brown, good to get your perspective. Thank you very much indeed. I just want to run through a couple of views because Doreen's been in touch. Morning, Doreen.
Hello, Doreen.
I think she's got a very important perspective. She says, as a COVID widow, very sadly a widow, I feel that Boris should not resign. Having workmates giving a birthday do, which could hardly be called a party at their workplace with people they work with, is not a crime. He didn't lie really, as he wouldn't consider it wrong any more than I or my late husband would. Anyone calling for resignations hasn't got the good of the nation at heart.
That's very brave for you to say so as well, Doreen. That really is. Thank you for that. Phil says, if he wasn't Prime Minister, he wouldn't have got fined. The Met wouldn't have put that much effort into investigating anybody else for COVID breaches. Yeah. It was a small gathering that lasted a small duration of time. It's only because of public pressure and publicity that they've bothered to investigate this at all. And to me, it's more concerning that the Met put so much effort into investigating this as opposed to investigating real crimes.
Well, that's a fair point. And Keith says, who was talking about, should it be fined at all? Stephen needs to recall the two ladies who were fined for going for a walk holding a cup of coffee. Therefore, a fine for holding a birthday celebration indoors does not appear unreasonable. Except, Keith, those two ladies had their fines overturned.
Interesting. Maybe the Prime Minister will appeal. That'd be interesting.
Because there was a fuss over it, quite rightly a fuss over those two ladies, and those fines were retracted.
So there you go. We appreciate your views, as you know, and it's a great way of taking the temperature of the country as well. So do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
It is 7:19. Let's bring you up to date then with some of the top stories today. And the Prime Minister and the Chancellor resisting calls to resign after paying fines for breaching lockdown rules. The Prime Minister said it didn't occur to him that his birthday gathering in June 2020 would be breaking the restrictions. They've both offered full apologies.
The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced at the Old Bailey today. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, could impose a whole life sentence, meaning that Ali would never be released.
More than a third of GPs plan to quit in the next 5 years. New figures from the GP Work-Life Survey found nearly half of family doctors aren't satisfied with their job, citing increasing workloads, demands from patients, and not having enough time to do the work properly. I hate to say it, I haven't got a lot of sympathy for GPs who are moaning about demands from patients at the moment.
I find the GP situation absolutely baffling because my experience with GPs is that they seem to be quite okay. I mean, sometimes they look a bit work-striven, but why are our GPs so unhappy? And are they really?
If you're a GP,
I would love to hear from you, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, and so much is being done remotely now. But that's just the whole idea of saying, oh, with too many demands from patients. Well, you sort of work for us, don't you? I mean, I hate to say it, but isn't that what you're there for?
You hear lots of conflicting stories as well, don't you? Some people who say they haven't been able to see their GP face-to-face for 2 years now, and other people saying there's absolutely no problem.
It just depends. It's the postcode lottery with it all, isn't it? Just where you are, where you live, and how they manage it.
Get in touch with us and tell us why you're so unhappy and what could be done to actually make things better. Because the other thing, you hear that they earn an awful lot of money as well.
They do. It's like 100 grand plus or whatever, isn't it? Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through on that. We need to move on, actually, and just have a look at the situation in Ukraine. President Biden has described the Kremlin's actions in Ukraine as genocide. This is what he had to say.
Family budget, your ability to fill up your tank, none of it should hinge on whether a dictator declares war and commits genocide half a world away.
Genocide, you see, that's what he said. And he later added that Vladimir Putin is trying to wipe out the very idea of being able to be Ukrainian. Those were his words as Russia faces allegations of chemical weapons usage in the besieged Ukrainian port of Mariupol.
Well, let's talk to Director of Security Programmes at the Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism, Hannah Shlest, who joins us now. It's really good to see you this morning. Are we getting any further indication, any further clarification as to actually what has happened in Mariupol?
Good morning. We're really lacking sufficient information about what is happening there because the city almost for the 1 month without the proper internet connection or any ability to call there to check what is happening. So we definitely know that some type of the chemical substance being thrown to the basements of the Azovstal. It is the huge metallurgical plant over there where a lot of the people and military are hiding. Considering that the territory is very big and many of the basements are very deep, it was not like a massive attack, but we have reports of at least 5 or 6 people that had all evidences of the chemical hazardous liquid that touched their face and eyes and all the symptoms that we usually have. Unfortunately, as there are no doctors and there is no possibility to have any type of the test, we cannot confirm what type of the hazardous being used over there. And also we need to remember that just 24 hours before this incident, representatives from the Russian proxies declared openly on their news that probably using of the chemical weapon is the best way how to get people out from the territory of that plant because the fighters are so strong that they don't want to get out.
I mean, you're speaking from Odessa. What's the feeling there? Is the feeling that things could get worse in your region?
We really hope that as for now, the situation around us are the same as it's been within these months, because Odessa is quite far from the east, and we see that now the concentration of the biggest Russian efforts are on the east. So for you to understand, that's approximately 1,000 kilometers, 7,000 kilometers, depends from which part you are talking about. However, we are definitely very carefully watching what is happening in Mykolaiv, another city approximately 150 kilometers from us, where Russians are trying to shell and to attack it from time to time, not successfully as for now. But for us, that is definitely a certain cover for Odessa city, because without capturing Mykolaiv, it would be extremely difficult to attack Odessa.
Do you think it's important that President Biden has started talking about genocide now? I mean, does that sort of language have an implication for what people are feeling on the ground?
You know, as an expert, I would definitely be careful sometimes with such words as genocide, because we have all the conventions that are defining it. But at the same time, for the last 2 weeks, we really have the reasons to speak about genocide. First of all, that is important because Mr. Putin and a lot of the Russian leadership been talking that it is NATO guilty in what is happening in Ukraine now. But NATO is definitely not guilty in the statements of the Russian leadership, including President Putin, when he says that Ukrainian state should not exist, Ukrainian nation doesn't exist, that when they win, they need to eradicate any national identity feelings in Ukraine. And what I'm quoting now ex-President Medvedev, President Putin, and several members of the parliament. Some of their statements recently published in media are even much, much worse. And according to this, you can name it Nazism, you can name it strong Russian nationalism, or you can name it the call for the genocide, because that is the open call for the eradication of the Ukrainian nation. And that is really how genocide is defined. When it would be just statements, that is one thing. That is just the crazy statements. But when you see the mass graves in Bucha or Irpin, when you see what is happening in Mariupol, you understand that they're ready to reach this goal of eradication of Ukrainian nation by the military forces.
Hannah, thanks very much indeed for joining us and bringing us up to date on the latest. Certainly the press here reporting that the Ukraine government are now investigating an alleged 6,000 war crimes on Putin's behalf. Yeah.
Good grief. Loads of your views. It's really interesting, or a lot of your thoughts. Some of them that have just struck me by surprise. Sue Walsh says, morning to you, Sue. I and probably the rest of the country are sick of hearing about the Partygate thing. They did wrong. They've been pilloried in the media. Now move on. There are more important things going on in the world. I thought GBNews were going to be better than this. What we can't do, I understand you're fed up with it, Sue, but what we can't do is it's on every paper. It's the first time the Prime Minister's broken the law in office. You can't ignore it, sadly.
And I think that's the point, is that I think we are all fed up with it. But is it right to be fed up with it just because time has moved on and there are now more important things that I suppose a Prime Minister should be looking at? Is it right to forget something that might have been wrong in the past?
Yeah.
We are all fed up with it, though, we really are. Yeah. But you can't avoid it.
No, but you are quite right that there are very important other things to be talking about, including the price squeeze, our cash squeeze. Look, 7% is the new rate of inflation we found out this morning. It's the 30-year high. We'll talk to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, in a couple of minutes.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Oh, it's 7:30 on the button. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
We're live for you across the UK on both your TV and your radio, and online, of course, anywhere in the world.
Well, yes, absolutely. And coming up for you today, could new drugs beat the so-called superbugs? We're going to be talking to Dr. Sarah Kayat for her advice. Also, we'll ask why so many GPs are choosing to call it quits.
Also today, we're live in Glasgow as we meet the man responsible for the homeless charity, working with local food banks to feed those struggling with the cost of living. The cost of living, that's what we're going to be talking about now.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, it's getting worse. Britain is consumed still by the crisis. Now, there have been some promising signs around employment and wages, but it's not all good.
But no, we've just learned that the rate of inflation increased to 7% in March from 6.2% in February.
Let's talk to our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan. Good to see you, Liam. Look, I mean, this is grim, isn't it? A 30-year high?
7% inflation is a big number, Stephen. It brings me no pleasure to report it. That's the consumer price index. The broader retail price index, that's up at 9.9%. That means during the year to March, prices of the basket of goods that the Office for National Statistics uses rose by 9.9%. And we learnt yesterday that wages on average across the UK rose by 4%. Roughly over the same period. Now, ordinarily, a 4% wage rise on average wouldn't be too bad. Sounds quite chunky, but not when inflation's going.
Oh, apologies. Apologies, we've lost Liam.
We seem to have lost Liam.
His line's
get
gone.
Him back.
His line's gone.
Oh,
I blame.
I'm not.
I blame the hackers.
Yeah, blame the Russians. We always used to. When I was a kid, we blamed the Russians for everything. We'll try and get Liam back up for us in a moment to try and explain that, because those inflation figures and things like that are just numbers to me, and I never really know how bad things are until you actually hear that, you know, literally the basket of goods, the householder's basket of goods, is going up in price.
Consumer price index and retail price index, it does all get a little bit confusing. But Liam is back, thankfully, to shed some light on it all. And Liam, you were just saying before you disappeared, it's all down to quite literally working out on a basket of goods in the supermarket.
So the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, tracks a basket of goods throughout the year. And during the year to March this year, so over that 12-month period, the cost of that basket of goods rose by 7%. That's the basic headline number. Then there's a broader basket of goods that they use that rose by 9.9%. And we can all feel this. And what I would say is that these headline numbers, they are very, very high. But I think people's lived experience of inflation is actually a lot higher. On my show yesterday, On the Money show, we talked to a couple who run a fish and chip shop up in Hartlepool, and the cost of the cooking oil that they use is up 80% over the last year. The cost of the potatoes that they use are up 30%. So in many parts of the economy, inflation are much higher. We're seeing some pictures of Rishi Sunak here filling up his car and so on. We all know that the cost of petrol and diesel is up a lot more than 10% over the last year. So yes, these headline inflation numbers are very high, but I actually think that the inflation that people are feeling in their everyday lives is much higher. And that's why I do think the government needs to do more to help ordinary people. We just had the spring statement last month. Benefits only went up by 3.1%. So they're some of our most vulnerable households, some of our most low-income families, and they're only getting a 3.1% bump in their benefit income when the cost of living is going up officially by 7% on one measure and 9.9% on the other. So there is a feeling that the economy is slowing down, and this is what inflation does. It was like this when I was a lad in the 1970s and the early 80s, and inflation got well into double digits. And it brings me no pleasure to say I think that's where we're going now. You were right, though, Stephen. There is some good news. Unemployment remains low. There's lots of vacancies in most parts of the country. Wages aren't particularly high, but there is work there if people want to work more and get more money to try and maintain their standard of living. But be in no doubt, these are very, very tough numbers. And that's why there is a feeling that the economy is slowing when we were meant to be in the middle of a sort of post-pandemic bounce back, post-lockdown bounce back. But it's not happening. And it's partly because of the war in Ukraine, the impact on food and fuel prices of that. But it's partly because since lockdown, since the pandemic, the global economy has never really kind of got back into gear to start producing at the rates that would keep these price rises down.
So you think it's going to go up even more?
I'm afraid I do, Anne, and I don't shoot the messenger. I'm quite an optimistic guy, but we have to tell it as it is. That's what we try and do on GB News, and we have to also reflect the experience of our viewers and listeners, and many of them write to me and they tell me inflation's 7%, 8%, 9%. In reality, it's much, much higher. So I do think inflation will get worse before it gets better. As I've said, the retail price index, the sort of broader measure, that's at 9.9%. So we are basically in double-digit inflation. Here's another number, something called, buried in the ONS database that I've just been looking at. There's something called input price inflation. That is the price of things that manufacturers need to make the stuff that they then sell to us. Things that the chip shop I referred to use to make the fish and chips that they then sell to us. So it's one step back in the supply chain. Input price inflation, Anne, in March 2022, hang on to your hat, 19.2%. So almost 20% inflation in the cost of things that manufacturers, producers need to produce the stuff that they give to us. And that input price inflation, in the 30 years I've been following and reporting on economics, I'm younger than I look, that always tends to be the kind of indication of where inflation is going to go, the headline inflation, the inflation we feel in the shops 2 or 3 months down the line. Yeah. So that's why I say with no pleasure whatsoever, I do think this inflation is going to get even higher. And I do think, and I've said it on GB News before, I do think there is going to have to be some kind of emergency budget this summer to deal with these fuel price rises. These are the March numbers I'm talking about. They don't even include the increase in fuel bills in April.
No, it's pretty depressing stuff. Look, Liam, thank you very much indeed. We're asking who would be a good Chancellor. Julie says, I think Liam Halligan would make a brilliant Chancellor. I think you could be right. You can catch Liam's show on the money, 1 o'clock this afternoon.
And do stay with us because David Mellor and Claire Muldoon will be back with us to discuss today's newspapers after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 20 minutes to 8. Now, time to go through the papers with former Conservative Minister David Mellor and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Very warm welcome to both of you. I guess there's still only one thing to talk about, but David, you were looking in the Telegraph about Ukraine's view of the German Chancellor.
Yes, I think it's interesting, you know, when people look to judge Boris, you know, Boris was sort of cheered on the streets of Kiev, which, you know, is something he can be proud of. We seem to be leading the opposition to what the Russians have been doing, whereas the Germans are still in deep doo-doo. Steinmeier is the president of Germany, but was one of the principal architects of a cozy up to Putin policy, which meant effectively the Germans were quite happy to allow their energy supplies to be controlled by the Russians. And of course, they're now in a very difficult position, because if their energy supplies are cut off by the Russians, that impacts on the ability of the German economy to function. And what it means is they've always been behind the run of play in terms of helping Ukraine. You know, they began this whole problem by sending the Ukrainians a few thousand helmets. And you know, you feel with the Germans, as much as we all love them, you know, they're always like a bad golfer. They're either one side of beyond the fairway, producing a Hitler, and now they're the other side of the fairway on the clubhouse lawn,
welcoming absolutely everyone.
Producing, and being craven in front of the Russians. And hopefully the new Chancellor of Germany is wising up to that. And the other thing that's interesting, Mrs. Merkel, her reputation is becoming very severely damaged, because we always need to remember she was born in East Germany. Her attitude to the Russians was never quite as strong as it ought to have been. So this is fascinating, and this is why, for all his many faults, and you know, how long have you got? We can talk about Boris's many faults. What he has done is grasp the need to reach out to Ukraine, and he's done that wonderfully well.
Isn't it interesting, though, because the whole Partygate thing, one of the big issues that the opposition were talking about was the fact that Boris was making us a laughing stock on the world stage. But we're not a laughing stock on the world stage, are we?
That's no, exactly not right. At all. And I think he's you know, achieved a great diplomacy through aplomb and through reaching out, as David has just said. He's become quite a good agent for Ukraine.
His critics are at home.
Exactly.
No, his only critics, almost.
And indeed, sometimes we have to look inwardly and a form of fraternal correction, almost, you know, to bring, you know, our leaders and ourselves back into line.
Oh, well, now, talking about bringing people into line, what about the Times and these climate protesters outside Lloyd's of London?
Well, do you know, you can put a ticket round your neck and, you know, strangle yourself almost against the goalpost. You can take your activism to the, you know, to the car parks, to the M25, to Lloyd's Bank. I still don't know what else that what's their proposal against fossil fuel. What do they say we should be doing instead of telling us what we shouldn't be doing?
Renewables.
Yes, but how can we do that with the crisis that's going on at the moment? Do they really have a point? And then we have Ben Goldsmith, who's been told off for his, quote, clumsy tweet, unquote, who is, entrenched in the Conservative Party, part of the grandees there, and yet now he's been told off, and the rest of the Conservatives are saying, as is, I think, the rest of the country, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? OK, if you come up and say you shouldn't be doing that, seal off everything, would you give us an example of something that we ought to be doing? Let us hear your message. You don't have to be as activistic about it as you are.
They wouldn't in the newspapers if they weren't.
Because the Guardian quotes Goldsmith, who is, the Goldsmiths lead charmed lives. They don't seem to need to have talent in order to get jobs that require intelligent, sensible people to do. So he's a non-executive director of the department. But this is what he said. He said, the protesters are right to be doing whatever it takes to wake people up. This is from The Guardian. The fossil fuel industry is grubby and dangerous. We need to unhook ourselves from our dependence ASAP. I'm with Extinction Rebellion. Why haven't they sacked him? It's ridiculous.
Well, he's deleted and apologised, hasn't he?
Yeah, but that's what everybody does.
You see, there is a growing momentum for this. There was in the Insulate Britain case, the judge who fined the people who were over the blocking the M25 said, well, I've got to fine you because this is a law, but actually, you've opened my eyes to what's going on and you've made a very good point. That's the judge.
I mean, where we have, as you rightly say, a difficulty is we're a house divided against ourselves. But in this of all times, as the country sails into choppier economic waters than we've been in for 30 years, I don't see how it's sustainable to actually allow these people the indulgence of effectively shutting the country down.
Yeah. The problem is where we will be in 10 years' time when hopefully economically we might be better off, but we've still got all of the green issues to cope with. And the activists are saying, or even people like Sir David Attenborough saying, you're leaving it too late. You're leaving it too late to do something about fossil fuel pollution.
COP26 in November was supposed to have solved all of this, and yet we don't hear anything about the remit or the report or the prospect of what's supposed to happen post-COP26.
No, it's a fair point. Look, can we have a look at... I was going to say The Star, working while ill.
Right.
Because I find this really interesting, the idea that if you've got COVID, people still tend to say, I can't go to work because I've got COVID, even if I actually feel all right. And yet, so are people applying that to other illnesses as well?
Well, I don't know if they're applying it to other illnesses, but don't forget, post-pandemic, people were supposed to be going back into the offices, and now a lot of the technology has meant that people don't have to return to the office. And laws in England and Wales and Scotland are different when you take a COVID test, when you should test, and indeed the isolation post a positive test. Quite a lot of people in certain other aspects of office works are still not back full-time into the office. And apparently 6.5 million lost shifts per a year. Working in the office, sick days soar. People are using, 10% of people are saying, well, my mental health is affected here, so therefore I can't make it in. You're talking about commuting. Is it safe? People's fears for their health, have greatly increased and are more in tune, I think, with themselves. As someone who's not taken a day off sick, because I'm freelance, if I don't work, I don't get paid. Yeah, exactly. I don't have the luxury of saying, I don't feel like work today, I might not come in. Okay, I have to keep going, I have to keep moving, and
maybe we get rid of salaries generally for jobs, and maybe we employ instead.
Well, that would never work.
You turn up, you get paid. You don't turn up, you don't get paid.
And it appears that those who might say, "Well, I need a break," are not going to get one so readily. The papers are full. Here's the Mail saying travellers must brace for a year of airport chaos, and this seems to be because a lot of people were let go during the pandemic. And when the airlines want them back, and the ground staff and security, they're not there. And the trouble with letting security people go, once you've let them go, you can't just stick someone back and hope for the best.
Without the training.
It takes a lot of training.
Yeah,
it does.
Well, where was the forward thinking? then?
Well, who's that wishful thinking going?
$1 million question.
In all the 50 years I've been in politics, I've often thought, where's the forward thinking? Because, you know, when I was a kid, I thought, it's wonderful, because the man in Whitehall, there's wonderful people in Whitehall. When I got to Whitehall, I discovered that they're as much at sea as the rest of us.
Yeah.
And this is a tragedy.
The men in the ministry, as it always used to be. David, Claire, thank you both very much indeed. We'll see you a little bit later on. It is 7:49. Let's run you through the headlines so far. And the PM and the Chancellor resisting calls to resign after breaching lockdown rules. The PM said it didn't occur to him that his birthday gathering in June 2020 would break restrictions. Both men have apologised.
The cost of living crisis is getting worse, with inflation hitting another 30-year high. Official figures show it jumped to 7% in March, up from 6.2% in February. High petrol and food prices fuelled the rise.
And the terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced today. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist act. He killed the Tory MP at his constituency surgery in October last year. Mr Justice Sweeney could impose a whole life sentence, meaning Ali will never be released.
Well, we've been talking about the cost of living crisis, and as it worsens, one Glasgow-based charity is helping people struggling to pay for basic daily needs.
Well, the Halliday Foundation walks the streets of the city, providing hot meals, toiletries, clothing and other essentials to the homeless. And Davy Donaldson, I beg your pardon, Davy, is with their founder and joins us from Glasgow. Now, sorry, Davy.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I'm here in Dalmarnock at the Chris Halliday Foundation in the city's East End. I'd like to say I'm joined by Chris Halliday himself. Chris, come in and join us. So, first of all, Chris, why has it been so busy?
Just the current climate, people choosing between heating and eating. People are struggling across the city. So we've noticed a huge increase with the food bank, and we've had to adapt our services and our range pop-up free shops throughout the city.
I mean, and in terms of why it's been so busy, I mean, how many people are coming here? I mean, has it got much busier that you're going to have to move premises or that kind of thing?
Yep, and we've noticed a huge increase in the referrals, so we're up at about 250. And the premises is too small now, so we're having to look for somewhere bigger to support more people.
Do you think that it's, you know, not just yourselves here, but across the city and across Scotland, that, you know, food banks are a breaking point?
Yep, definitely at breaking point. Yep, we work with many partners across the city, and we've spoke to them, and they're all the same. They're all the same.
It must be a very, very difficult and a very challenging time for you to try and make sure that, you know, supply meets the demand, the increasing demand that we're seeing.
Yep, we're working round the clock, and we're just trying to get as much donations in as possible, because we rely heavily on donations for the public and businesses. So the increase has been phenomenal. So we're at breaking point now. Yeah.
And we were talking before, you know, we look over the shoulder here, we've got furniture, we've got paint, we've got everything here, and you really do quite a lot to make sure that you help people. Another thing that you are doing as well, understand, is trying to get people, rather than taking stuff from a food bank and go home and cooking it themselves, is to actually get a hot meal. How does that work?
Yeah, so we've opened up a community cafe within Barrafield Community Centre, and we have a pay it forward system, so we've got a Halliday pound token that people can, that these are distributed to people who are homeless, begging, struggling, and they can actually come into the cafe and receive a free hot meal and a drink.
I mean, that's absolutely fantastic, because a lot of people, that'll be an absolute godsend for them.
Yep, we've had loads of good feedback. As well as them coming in for a free hot meal and a drink, we can also support them in many ways. So we managed to get someone into temporary accommodation one time when they brought in the token.
I mean, that's really brilliant, isn't it? I mean, and other people doing this kind of thing across the city, or is this just something that you've started yourself?
There is other pay it forwards across the city, but ours is slightly different because of the kind of wraparound support we've got. So that is a difference.
Brilliant, Chris. Thanks for joining us. There we go. Chris Halliday from the Chris Halliday Foundation, doing absolutely superb work across Glasgow, helping those who need help at a very, very difficult time for everyone.
It is indeed a difficult time for everyone. It couldn't be, more moot actually discussing those issues at the moment, with the cost of living going up and now inflation being 7%.
7%,
which, as I was saying earlier, actually, the figures tend to mean nothing to me until I see that basket of goods thing. And that's what really brings it home, that prices are going up, wages aren't.
I'll tell you what you have to do is do a bit of nifty shopping around the supermarket. And there are some bargains to be had. I'll tell you what I find a little bit frustrating. I pay on one of these, you can go around and scan the shopping with your phone as you go.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes, because I've got a membership card for a supermarket, and it then flashes up on the screen saying, oh, because you're a member, this is now 15 pence cheaper or whatever. But it doesn't say on the thing, so you don't know before you pick it up.
Oh, I see. Oh. Yeah, but it's
which
good,
would be quite useful. So
yes,
at least knocking money off. I tell you what, we'll go through.
So you scan everything as you go?
Oh, yes. Oh, it's very good.
So as you're putting it in your basket,
you just scan it with your phone.
Yeah.
And then you just clock it up at the till and... Oh, it's very good. It's very, very good.
I know they brought that in a few years ago and I couldn't get my head around it then.
Oh, I'm going to have to give you a full technology training.
Yes, we are. We're going to have to do a day, aren't we? You can do my DAB radio, and I had another go at it all day yesterday. Got nowhere. I can get nearly any other radio station. For some reason, I'm not getting GBNews. I need a new car, is what I need.
Oh, that could be the answer. I just want to say, Sheila's been in touch. I could fall out with you, Sheila. She says, I just have to say, Anne, that you look lovely today. Your blouse and cardigan are perfect. Sorry, Stephen, I like you as well, but Anne just looks fabulous.
Well, thank you. But you'd look funny in this, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would. Stay with us. Top stories coming up.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak apologise for lockdown breaches amid growing calls for them to resign.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 13th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We are live across your TV, your radio and online, and this is what we've got for you today.
Well, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have apologised and paid those fines issued to them for breaches of lockdown laws. Boris Johnson said last night he wanted to get on and deliver the mandate he had. We'll speak to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, as calls continue for the Prime Minister to resign, and the Chancellor, actually.
More than 20 people in New York have been injured after a gunman wearing a gas mask detonated smoke grenades and opened fire on morning commuters. A manhunt is currently underway after the man fled the scene.
US President Joe Biden has accused Russia of committing genocide in Ukraine. Speaking at an event last night in Iowa, he stated that Putin was trying to wipe out the idea of even being Ukrainian.
Love to hear from you on anything you want to talk about this morning. Hundreds of you getting in touch over Partygate, of course. But if there's anything else that floats your boat, why not drop us a line? gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Well, to our top story today, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak are amongst 50 people issued fines by the Metropolitan Police over their lockdown breaches.
Well, Mr Johnson and Mr Sunak apologised for those breaches, the Prime Minister saying it didn't occur to him the gathering he'd attended for his birthday in June last year, or June 2020, I should say, was a violation of the rules. Asked if he would resign, this is what he had to say.
I want to be able to get on and deliver the mandate that I have, but also to tackle the problems that the country must face right now, and to make sure that we get on with delivering for the people of this country. That is my priority.
Well, the Labour leader Keir Starmer joined the growing chorus of voices pushing for Boris Johnson to resign, saying the Conservatives are totally unfit to govern.
Well, earlier we spoke to former Conservative MP and former political columnist, actually, for The Independent, Michael Brown, on what he thinks the situation means for the Prime Minister and the Tory party.
In all of this, if you're a Tory MP, you really need the voters, finally, to pass their judgment. And I would be a Tory MP today, even if I was angry, as I am with what Boris has done over Partygate, I would say to myself, this is not the moment to change the Prime Minister. And I suspect that most Tory MPs, even those who've put in letters, will stay their hand, at least until we have the first judgment of the voters at the ballot box. At the end of the day, I'm always very uncomfortable in a democracy with journalists, the sheer weight of the media, and even though I note the poll that you've just put out to your viewers, at the end of the day, I think voters are the ones who should hire and fire a Prime Minister.
A lot of people say, well, look, there's bigger things to worry about now. And we have just, as well as what's going on in Ukraine, obviously very important, but the cost of living crisis. And we've just heard, we've got the new inflation figures out, 7%. That's a 30-year high.
It wasn't long ago that the three of us were talking about inflation touching 10%, and that's going to certainly happen. I think that ultimately is going to be what the voters will judge our politicians on and will judge Boris Johnson on. If we get to a point, maybe later in the summer, Tory party conference, where it is patently obvious that Boris is on course to lose your seat if you're a red wall Tory MP sitting on a tiny little majority. But I would just point out to you one by-election result that happened in the High Peak constituency, Anne. Last Thursday, High Peak, which returned a Tory MP, gained from Labour with a majority of 500. A Labour seat was lost to the Tories last Thursday, which turned the council from Labour control to no overall control. Equally, on the same day, there was a by-election last Thursday in David Davis's constituency. A massive, safe Tory seat went Liberal Democrat. Now, Boris could argue, well, that's because David Davis said, in the name of God, go, and the Tory voters there are punishing David Davis, not Boris, because we've still got to go through all these other offences that have allegedly been committed inside number 10 Downing Street. So my suspicion is that the local elections will take place before Sue Gray, and even if they're bad, Boris will simply say, this is midterm blues. My hunch is the Houdini of British politics has still yet some more fight in him.
Let's talk to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden MP. Good to see you this morning. Look, what would you say to the hundreds and hundreds of viewers who get in touch this morning? Say, yeah, we don't like what happened, we're not happy about it, but they've apologised, they've paid the fine. Time to move on.
Well, what I would say is it's corrosive to our democracy if you have a situation where the Prime Minister not once but repeatedly broke the rules that he set for everybody else in the most testing of times. I mean, everybody can fall from grace, everyone can make a mistake, I accept that, but this wasn't just one event, it was a pattern. The Metropolitan Police are looking into, I think it's 12 events. And if you have a situation where it's established that there's one rule for the ruled and another for those who are ruled, that's pretty undermining of our democracy. And not only did he repeatedly break the rules, but he repeatedly lied about it too. So if we shrug this off and we sort of say, let's move on, then I think we're accepting something that's very corrosive of our democracy. And that's why it's more serious than just an individual breach.
In terms of lying about it, can I just put one point to you, which we all seem to have forgotten about, is that at the time of the birthday party, which is what he's been fined for, it was released to the papers by number 10. At the time, there was a picture of this celebration, as small as it was, in the Times. And so, clearly, the Prime Minister's right, isn't he, when he said, well, I didn't realise that anything was wrong with this. It didn't occur to me. They didn't try to keep it a secret.
I've sat in Parliament for however many months it is since this saga began and heard one defence after another. There were no parties. I've been assured there were no parties. I was at parties and I didn't realise there were parties, and so on and so forth. It's pretty clear that he's not been telling the truth about this, and he accepts us to just accept that because that's part of his character. So I think it is serious, both in terms of the breach and in terms of Boris Johnson's relationship with the truth. And where you get down to is what then happens. And in a democracy, a Prime Minister only goes when they've got an 80-seat majority in two sets of circumstances. One is if he decides to go himself, which doesn't look likely, and that then places the responsibility with the Conservative MPs. If they choose to keep him, then they will destroy any credibility they have as the party of law and order. And put yourself in the position of a police officer today who's out there trying to protect us. What do you think the person who they tap on the shoulder is going to say to them if they try to stop wrongdoing today? It's pretty likely that they're going to hear, well, if the Prime Minister and the Chancellor can break the law, why can't I?
I think we're going to leave it there. There seems to be something slightly wrong with our signal to you at the moment. There's some very strange noises going on in the background, which is a bit disconcerting. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. That's Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, the MP, Pat McFadden. There was I don't know if you heard it, there was a really weird noise going on.
I think it was the fan on his laptop.
On the laptop?
I think so.
It's making a very strange noise, isn't it?
Needs to renew his laptop.
It's a shame because there's so much more to talk about, given the fact that, which is the bigger news today? The fact that these fines have been issued and the Prime Minister's had to apologise for ostensibly breaking the law, and Rishi Sunak as well, or which is the bigger news that finally we hear now that inflation has gone up to 7%. It's a 30-year high. And that just shows there are very big issues to be dealing with, not just a war in Ukraine and how we support Ukrainians, but there's huge domestic issues to be attacked.
That's the Sun. I'm sorry, but I've got work to do.
Is that how you feel this morning?
I have to say, I think that's the most powerful headline of the day today, because I think that's how a lot of people feel. And a lot of you getting in touch saying, yeah, he's not done the right thing, he's made a mistake, and he's apologised, and perhaps under other circumstances would have to go. But now, I don't know. Scott, I've read this one out before, but it's a really good point. Scott emailed in, define a party. Starmer had pizza and a bottle of lager with colleagues in the workplace. There was a picture of that, if you remember.
Exactly the same situation,
That's not a party. Boris had cake and wine, and it is a party. Not sure it stacks up, which I think is a fair point.
It is, yeah.
And I've had... Should I just run through this? I put a poll on Stephen GBNews if you want to take part. There's 11 minutes left to vote. 2,652 people have voted so far. Wow. Should the Prime Minister stay? 66%. Should he go? 34%. Oh, it's not scientific, of course.
No, but I do think that shows how divided people are, but also not very divided, if you see what I mean. I think we all see that we're all fed up with Partygate, but it was there, and it is wrong that they didn't get it at the time. But there are so many more important things. And when Boris has said, I want to get on with delivering my mandate, he was mandated. That's the way we run our politics.
Yes, yeah.
He was voted in. He has a job to do. And just because we don't like some of the things that he's done, and he's had to be brought up for it, he still has that job to deliver until the next general election.
But he has broken the law. It's not a crime. It's not a criminal. But nevertheless, the law has been breached, which is the first time a sitting Prime Minister has done that. So does that make it different? Don't know. Christina, morning Christina, says, no, both should stay and get on with the job in hand. The idea of anyone else dealing with the Ukrainian war, especially as Putin would love to work with Starmer, well, I don't know if that's true, that would be a green light for Putin to continue his killing spree. Boris is the most supported PM by the silent majority. Well, I don't know if you're right or wrong on that, Christina. We'll find out that in the general election. However, the idea that, we've got the war in Ukraine, we've got the cost of living crisis. I mean, admittedly, there's criticism that the Chancellor hasn't done enough to deal with that. But even so...
Did they break the law?
Yes.
Was it law? When you break the law, surely you're charged by the police.
No, not... It's a bit... Because it's a fixed penalty notice. So it's like you break the law if you speed, but it's not you're not a criminal.
It's not a crime. So
It's not criminal law in that sense.
It's what, though? If it's not criminal law, what law is it?
It is that thing with
it's a summary law or something,
yeah,
isn't
something
it?
like that.
So he has actually broken the law. A lot of people wouldn't see that in the same way. He wasn't charged with anything.
No. But
didn't go before a court or a judge.
Because it's a fixed penalty notice, you are sort of convicted of it, if you like, and you then can appeal. But whether he will appeal or not, I don't know. Keep your thoughts coming through, because it's fascinating.
The more you hear about
perspective.
that so-called party, it doesn't really sound like a party.
No, this is the thing.
And I fail to see why Keir Starmer hasn't come under the same scrutiny for a picture of him, swigging a bottle of beer and
with
pizza,
colleagues.
With colleagues in the same sort of layout. Don't understand the difference.
No, I don't know. Perhaps the difference may be that there could be more... They're investigating, obviously, a number of events that happened in Downing Street.
Yes.
So there could be more fines on the way. We just don't know.
But why hasn't Keir Starmer been investigated for a fine?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Interesting, though, isn't it?
Sorry to keep saying that to you. I don't know. If you've got a view on that, please let us know. If you can elucidate, that would help, or illuminate.
Or tell me what elucidate means.
Expand.
Oh, right, I see.
I think.
Lovely.
I think.
Look, it is 13 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories today then. And as we've been hearing, the PM and the Chancellor resisting calls to resign after paying fines for breaching lockdown rules. Boris Johnson said it didn't occur to him that his birthday gathering in June 2020 would be breaking COVID restrictions. They have both apologised.
The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced at the Old Bailey today. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. And the judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, could impose a whole life sentence, meaning that Ali would never be released.
Cost of living crisis is getting worse. Inflation figures have hit a 30-year high. Official figures out this morning show it jumped 7% in March, up from 6.2% in February. Petrol prices, food prices, said to be responsible for this rise. So, as the situation in Ukraine and Russia escalates, President Biden has described the Kremlin's actions in Ukraine as genocide. This is what he had to say.
Family budget, your ability to fill up your tank, none of it should hinge on whether a dictator declares war and commits genocide in half a world away.
Well, Joe Biden's words come as Russia faces allegations of chemical weapons usage in the besieged Ukrainian port of Mariupol.
Well, let's talk to security expert and columnist Elizabeth Braw, who joins us in the studio. Good to see you this morning. In terms of, we'll talk about what's happening on the ground in a minute, but in terms of the language and the rhetoric here, is that significant that this has been said by the US president?
It is, because genocide is a specific claim, and it's a claim, it's a crime for which you can be convicted after a war, as was the case in previous, has been the case in a number of previous wars, and it's also quite a bit more grave as a crime than just killing soldiers or accidentally killing civilians in a war. So it is very significant. I'm not sure it will further the cause of Ukraine in this conflict for the West to start talking about genocide. What matters is really for Ukraine to win so that we can talk about it afterwards.
Yes, exactly. But at the moment, you have to log these things, though, don't you? Because they will be, or hopefully they will be useful one day. There's a report in the Daily Mail today saying that the Ukrainian government are logging, and they have logged at the moment, 6,000 what they're calling war crimes against Putin. It is important to have all of these things written down, isn't it?
Written down, photographed, documented to the last detail, because we can all have the feeling that a genocide is happening. But unless you have that documentation, you won't be able to bring charges after the war. And we should remember that after a while, as with all crimes, the evidence risks disappearing. So it's really important and challenging, but important and indeed crucial, vital to collect evidence now already during this conflict.
Mind you, what we are calling and what the Ukrainians are calling evidence, Putin just sort of dismisses as fake news.
Yes.
And would in a court of law, I presume, if he ever was brought up.
And he probably would. Of course, there are legal standards that courts of law follow, including the International Criminal Court and the Nuremberg trial back after the Second World War. So it's not like you can get out of being convicted of a crime simply by calling the allegations fake news. But nevertheless, this is a Russian strategy to constantly sow doubt on whatever the other side says, whatever the other side presents. And so far, they've been having some luck because the global public is confused about what's really happening.
What's your analysis of the strategy on the ground now? Because, I mean, obviously there's allegations of chemical weapons use in Mariupol, but which we don't know if they're true or not at the moment. But what we do know is that the Russian forces consolidating in the east, and it's a very big question as to what they do from that point.
What they seem to be wanting to do is to claim that strip of land in the east, going down the border all the way to the sea, to Mariupol, to then, for the 9th of May, which is Victory Day in Russia, be able to claim victory in Ukraine, having seized or occupied or held this strip of land. It's not exactly denazifying Ukraine, which is what they set out to do. A very odd goal. But anyway, it's not occupying the whole of Ukraine. It's very much sort of a consolation prize. But that seems to be their objective for now.
Can you explain for us this term denazification? What is it all about?
Well, it's in the eye of the beholder. Anybody can say they want to denazify a country, a community, what have you. But it's also a projection, really, you know, for a country to accuse another country of being a Nazi-led country. It's then you put the other country in the position of having to say, well, hang on, we are not Nazis here. And no respectable country would accuse another country of being a Nazi-infested. It's not what you do in polite company among sovereign nations. But yet, if you don't care about your reputation, if you don't care about being seen as a country that spreads ill will and lies, then you can do whatever you like.
Is there any truth to the claim that there have been legitimate concerns about some of the political ideology that was existing at the top in Ukraine? Then, I mean, is there any legitimacy to those claims?
So President Zelensky is a committed Democrat and was elected in free and fair elections. In any country there will be some radical elements, but Ukraine has at the moment and has had now for a number of years clear democratic credentials. Unlike certain other countries, if you're really concerned about Nazis, you shouldn't look at Ukraine, you should look in a few other countries, including your own possibly if you're Russia.
Yeah. It's just a final point, because we're out of time, really. But there is all this talk, and certainly from the international community, of saying, well, look, at some point, if we get the message through to the Russians will depose Putin and stop all of this. Can that ever actually happen? I mean, it's not actually a democracy, is it? It's an autocracy.
I've been hoping for it, and I think the Russian public won't depose Putin, but self-respecting generals, self-respecting senior civil servants, ambassadors will say, well, hang on, I'm a professional. I don't want to be affiliated, associated with this regime that goes about killing civilians indiscriminately in Ukraine. But that doesn't seem to be happening. I would have thought a coup could have happened by now simply because these people want to preserve their own reputation for posterity and indeed for any sort of subsequent government. But they seem to be, if they exist, they are individuals and they can't find a way of doing it together. So I suspect it's not going to happen.
Okay. Yes, and we've heard before on this programme, haven't we, that some of the generals are, rather more extreme than Putin himself. So you've almost got to be careful what you wish for, haven't you?
Yeah, Elizabeth Brawl, good to see you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Stay with us, because we've got some good news for you. There's a new drug that could turn the tide against so-called superbugs. We'll find out more after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland, where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:26. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And of course, we are live, absolutely live across the UK on your TV, your radio, and online.
Relatively live, anyway. Still to
Relatively live.
Yeah, no, feeling quite weird. Still to come on the programme, there's lots to talk about. The UK Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, is set to announce new measures to resolve the cladding crisis. That's later today. We're going to be talking to an estate agent, Jeremy Leaf, about that.
Also this morning, with growing calls for the PM to resign over Partygate, we're going to be live in his constituency of Uxbridge.
Now, this is really interesting. 2 new medications which fight drug-resistant superbugs could soon become available to NHS patients in England.
Now, if used, the drugs would help the overstretched health service cope with an influx of patients, as GPs have been ordered to work overtime over the Easter holidays, apparently.
Yeah, well, Dr. Sarah Kayat joins us in the studio. This is good news, isn't it? That at last there may be something to defeat the superbugs.
Exactly. So for those that don't know, superbugs are these microorganisms that are able to evade normal treatments, so normal antibiotics for bacteria, for example, and it can make people particularly unwell, and several people die because of these superbugs. But these 2 drugs, so one is called cefiderocol and one is cefidaxime. Ceftazidime with avibactam. Sorry, they're new drugs, so they're new to me as well. It's really great news, because often manufacturers and drug companies don't usually go into making these because they're not considered money makers, unfortunately, because we only use a small amount of them. But what's great about what's happening now is that the government have agreed that they'll be paying these manufacturers a fixed fee so that they can still produce it and also encourage other companies to become more innovative and produce more of these.
Is this all part of the battle, and there is a battle, isn't there, to develop new antibiotics? Because there's all this concern about us becoming resistant.
Exactly. So, resistance is out there. You only have to look at pneumonias that are becoming harder to treat, sepsis. even things like gonorrhea, they're all out there and they're not being treated appropriately, and people are dying as a result.
And it was we've been led to believe, haven't we? It's because there literally has been an over-prescription of ordinary bog-standard antibiotics.
Certainly that's one of the reasons. Overprescription, also use of antibiotics in farming. We also know that people not taking the antibiotics appropriately and in the way that they've been prescribed. These are all feeding into antibiotic resistance.
But luckily, and thank goodness, the scientists have been working on these super-duper antibiotics. That's basically what they are.
Well, yeah, let's label it as that.
Yeah,
yeah, no, it's a fair point. Look, it's interesting that as all this happens, there's all great news, of course. There's also the stories out today saying, look, GPs are feeling very stressed, overwhelmed. I can't think what the figure was now, but certainly a good proportion thinking they're going to resign in the next 5 years. Is it fair? One of the things in this survey was saying they feel too many demands from patients. Well, isn't that your job?
Absolutely. So, look, our job is to care for our patients. And if our patients have those demands, then of course, but the issue is that we have got such a backlog with numbers of GPs going down. We were promised an extra 5,000 GPs by 2020, and in fact, it dropped by 2,000. We were then, advised that we're going to be getting an extra 6,000 by Boris Johnson by 2024, and the survey has shown that a third of GPs over the age of 50 are going to be retiring. So this isn't going to happen. And so with all of that backlog, and with the pressures of COVID and what's going on in A&E right now, you can understand that GPs are feeling that pressure. And so we've only kind of just started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel at the end of winter, and now being asked to do extended hours over Easter. It's a hard pill to swallow.
It really is it? Because, that's the trouble. You see, depending on which newspaper you want to read, sometimes you read headlines that say GPs are earning a fantastic amount of money because they are seeing so many patients. You get lots of reports from people saying, I haven't seen my GP in the last 2 years and can't get to see them. And others saying, it's absolutely fine. My local surgery is brilliant.
I'm sure there is going to be a complete, difference across the board in different areas, places where it's harder to get GPs. A lot of London GP practices are able to get a lot of GPs, but there are some areas where, they're completely
If you're in
shallow.
medical school and you're doing your final year and you're going to have to try and decide on your specialty, is GP work now seen as unpopular?
I don't know what the trainees say, but we do know that there are a good number of trainees starting to go through the GP roles. So we do know that it's not considered an unenticing job, and for anyone out there, it's a wonderful job, and I love it. It's hard, but it's wonderful. So don't be put off.
When you say hard, how is it hard? Is it long hours? Is it just a hard slog when you're there? Is it awful having to deal with people's stupid problems as well as their
I would never
proper
call
ones?
Anybody's problem stupid, ever, because if they're coming in with it, it means something to them. But you have to remember that, yes, it's long hours. It's only 10 minutes per consultation, but you're always spending more than 10 minutes, so you're going over your time.
So you're constantly being nagged by the diary, as it were,
Yeah,
by the calendar.
exactly. And you don't get home to see your own family, and you are constantly thinking about, did I manage that patient correctly over the weekends? And so it's not a job that you ever switch off from, but it's rewarding.
Yeah, I bet it is. And it's, we're so reliant on you, and rightly so. I think it's like any job, isn't it? It's like the police. When something goes wrong, we moan. We don't say thank you when things go right 99% of the time.
On the other hand, I tell you, you feel very close to a GP who you do, have some connection with. I can remember the names of my family GPs from when I was little.
Yeah.
Dr. Elliott and Dr. May. But they came to the house often as well in those days. But I remember my mum saying how brilliant it was when the National Health Service sort of came in and you were told you will have a general practitioner and you will have a personal relationship with them. How brilliant it absolutely was brilliant.
Yeah.
We need to get back to that a little bit more.
Well, that's right.
Dr. Kaya, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Gillian says, growing up on Teesside in the 1970s, my father was the local GP.
Oh.
He was regularly on call, evenings and weekends, and I clearly remember the phone ringing through the night. Dad would often get out of bed more than once to do an emergency house call and then be at his desk for morning surgery at 8 every weekday morning. That was all part of being a family doctor in those days. My dad loved his job and says there was never a day during his entire career that he didn't want to go to work.
You see, now that's good, isn't it? That's a nice way to look at it. Keep your thoughts coming through. Look, it is 8:33. Let's just bring you up to date with some of the headlines this morning. And the cost of living crisis is getting worse. Inflation has hit a 30-year high. Official figures show it jumped to 7% in March, up from 6.2% in February. Not surprisingly, food prices and petrol are behind all of this, apparently.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are resisting calls to resign after paying fines for breaching those lockdown rules. Boris Johnson said it didn't occur to him that the birthday gathering in June 2020, where he was ambushed with a cake, would be breaking COVID restrictions. They have both offered full apologies.
The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced today. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at his constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. Mr Justice Sweeney, who could impose a whole life sentence. That would mean that Ali would never be released.
The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, is expected to make an announcement today which will see new safety measures being brought into the building industry to remove unsafe cladding and protect leaseholders.
Well, meanwhile, MPs are warning that safe housing is out of reach for many private renters. Let's talk to independent North London estate agency owner Jeremy Leaf, who's here. Good to see you this morning, as always. Look, can we talk cladding to begin with? It's hugely important. In the regulations that have been brought in so far, your building has to be a certain height, doesn't it, to qualify for this money. Is that now going to change?
I think it will change. It's certainly moving in the right direction. It's something which political parties have had difficulty grappling with for such a long time. And we've seen all the headlines of leaseholders having to potentially cough up over £100,000 in some cases. It's just awful. And hopefully this is Michael Gove has found a way.
Yeah, because it was not only making it very expensive for them to take any action themselves, but it was also rendering their homes unsaleable.
Absolutely, or unlettable or whatever. But equally, it was unfair on the builders or developers who may not have been responsible for building the property in the first place in a bad way. Or maybe it was the components of the building, you know, the cladding or the roofing or the way it was built, the workmanship. Is it fair for them to pay?
So it's one of those things that it's going to cost a lot of money, which way it falls.
Absolutely.
But we've got to get on with it.
Well, I think that's what people, Michael Gove and the government have been saying. We've got to find a way out. They're going towards the developers to ask them to contribute much more. And first it was thought it wouldn't work. But it seems that the larger developers have agreed in principle, which is a good start.
Yeah, it's just as you said. I mean, where's the money going to come from? It depends on who you want to blame for the whole crisis in the first place. But we can't wait for a long inquiry into that.
Well, absolutely. But the other point is, as you touched on, Anne, is how long is it going to take? For instance, if manufacturers are at fault, how long is it going to take to actually prove that they were responsible for what they did and proving guilt and then asking them to contribute, by which time the company may have gone out of business.
Well, they already have in some cases, haven't they?
I mean, blame is, we always like to blame people. Absolutely. Sometimes blame doesn't work, does it? I think, these sort of things. Look, you mentioned people not being able to let some of these properties, never mind sell them. If you are a renter, things are looking really grim at the moment. I mean, the price of rent is going through the roof, isn't it?
It has been. It's like a lot of these things. You cover it on here quite frequently. A lot of the surveys we all look at, even inflation coming out today, are what's happening in the past. We all know when we go into our shops, the price of everything is going through the roof. So it's happened with rents as well, but I think it's coming back. Right. Particularly those who can least afford to pay are saying, well, actually, we can't pay.
Just can't pay.
Can't pay. Landlords don't have a thing.
How do landlords respond to that? Because they've got to be, if you've got a good tenant, you've got to be flexible, haven't you?
Absolutely. My view is, you've got a good tenant, lock the door, throw away the key. Make sure, if you've got a good tenant,
look after them.
Look after them. And most landlords get it.
But not all landlords are rich, are they, either?
Absolutely.
Some of them are really struggling as well, and you don't want them to go under, because then the renter loses their property.
Well, that's the problem at the moment. Renting has become much more of a political issue. Now we're seeing 11 million people in the country. In places like London, it's around 30% of people living there. People are staying in rental accommodation for much longer. Families are there with children at schools and so on. It's become a really hot political issue, and we've got to get it right.
Yeah, we have. Well, Will we ever
It's one of the
Will we ever
things
get
that
it
we've
right?
said today.
Excuse
Got to
me.
get it right. Yeah.
Jeremy Leaf, good to see you. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
very
indeed.
much indeed. Do stay with us. We're going to take a look at the papers next as Boris Johnson resists call to resign. How would Margaret Thatcher have handled it? Eh? We'll ask David Mellor and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. See you after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is, hold on, 8:41. There you go. This is GB News. Good to have you with us on TV and on radio this morning. Let's take you through the headlines so far today.
Police in New York are searching for a man believed to be responsible for yesterday's shooting at a subway station in Brooklyn. It injured more than 20 people. And the person of interest, they're calling, is 62-year-old Frank James, who fled the scene after setting off smoke bombs and allegedly opening fire, striking 10 people directly.
Wayne Couzens is set to appear in court today, charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure. The alleged incident, said to have taken place in Kent in the first 2 months of last year, he is currently serving a whole life sentence for killing 33-year-old Sarah Everard in March of last year when he was serving in the Metropolitan Police.
Prince Charles is calling on all of us to buy certified ocean-friendly products when we go shopping. The Prince of Wales made a speech at our ocean conference, warning the current threat to sea life is dire. The future king, of course he is, says we need to tackle the problem of plastic pollution on a massive scale. I'm glad he's still doing his. I'm glad he's still doing his campaigning.
Oh yeah, well why not?
Or activism, depending on
Activism.
Well, yes, I tell you what though, when it comes to plastic pollution in the oceans and what they call the single-use plastics and all the rest of
affects
it,
us all.
it is a disgrace.
And it's something we could easily do something about.
Yeah.
Just don't buy them.
Do you think that's why the genetically modified caviar has come out then, do you think?
Ooh, well, I'm very excited, yes,
Yeah.
about the genetically modified. Apparently, caviar, as we know, is so ridiculously expensive, but they've been able to grow it in a laboratory, which is going to significantly bring down the price of caviar. I am very pleased to tell you.
I have to say, I wouldn't eat. I mean, I don't eat genetically modified soya, so I don't know if I'd ever be tempted to go through constructed grown meat or fish.
But would you feed it to your cat? That's
the cat would have it. Yeah,
Your cat would have caviar.
But you and I are men of the people. We don't do caviar. We have to ask Rishi what good caviar.
Well, this is true.
I love a drop.
As I often say on this programme, David, if I'm having a treat, I have a pot noodle. It's true. It's my guilty.
He's a man of the people.
It is my guilty pleasure.
I don't. I like caviar.
Guilty pleasure. As you can see, former Conservative Minister David Mellor is here, along with Claire Muldoon, to take us through the papers. It is very good to have you both back.
Yes, it is.
And I mean, the Partygate thing. The Sun's got I think the Sun's got the best headline of the day on all of this.
Let's have a look at that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I've got work to do.
There you go. Yeah.
And we have to hope that he means it, because, of course, one of the problems with Boris is all these unopened boxes and whether he actually is winging it or working his way through it. But I think the Sun is very much a barometer of Conservative feeling, particularly links into the Conservative support in the traditional, working class areas. And Trevor Kavanagh, who was for many years their political editor, says many will not forgive him, but is this really a hanging offence? And I think Trevor Kavanagh there sums up in the Sun what most people are now thinking. 3 months ago, I think if this had come out 3 months ago, Boris would have been dead meat. As
David, at the date it happened, it was reported in the Times and no one batted an eyelid.
Yeah.
So what is this, a witch hunt?
No, I think, look, Boris lied repeatedly. Boris lied repeatedly that there were no breaches of the rules. It is deeply offensive that people who made the rules were sitting there in number 10, breaking them. And, the people I feel sorry for are those who had loved ones die of COVID, who couldn't go and see them, couldn't do this, couldn't do that, while the people who made those rules were swilling cheap wine in the gardens of number 10.
See,
I mean, this is contemptible.
You made the point earlier that Margaret
Sam.
Thatcher, for instance, would never have allowed it from the start. She was a greengrocer's daughter, wasn't she?
Yes.
She was very much a Sun reader's daughter. She wasn't posh, in other words. And have we now got a cabinet of people who are so posh they actually don't understand?
Well, they're just... No, I think what it is, it's discipline, you see. And Margaret Thatcher was a very disciplined woman. And although Dennis and I would sometimes slip off for the odd gin and tonic, we definitely couldn't flaunt ourselves around the gardens of number 10. And I think when you look at those pictures, this is like a sort of, I don't know, a sort of rather casually run university campus. It isn't where people are making the laws at a time of great national distress. And it's like these people blocked it all out. And as far as they were concerned, because we make the rules, we can break the rules. And the problem for Boris, and this is why Boris is only out of the wood for a brief period, Boris is a congenital non-complier with rules. So, he'll fall over his feet again quite soon, I suspect.
What about this? We mentioned this earlier on, David, but Doreen got in touch, who's a COVID widow. And because you mentioned people who've died. She said, I feel that Boris should not resign. Anyone calling for resignations hasn't got the good of the nation at heart.
No, I mean that.
And she lost somebody during COVID.
You can see that because there's no doubt about it that, Boris, I still worry about whether Boris will be able to handle, the economic crisis. You've been having it on the news, inflation up to 8%, highest for 30 years. But one thing Boris has done, he has given the Brits a reason to have pride in standing up against Putin and in supporting the Ukrainians. Boris can do a walkabout on the streets of Kiev being warmly greeted by people.
German president.
The president of Germany is told, don't turn up, we don't want to see you. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I said at the beginning of the pandemic, it ought to have been a cross-party response to lockdowns. But the reality is these laws were brought through the Houses of Parliament, rushed through, and it was a cross-party vote. We've got members of the Labour Party who misused the rules as well. There's photographs of Keir Starmer eating pizza. Corbyn apologised when he had supper with over 6 people with the allowed bubbles.
What is all this about Stephen Kinnock as well? Because
he's non-dom status. So for tax purposes, he's resident in Switzerland.
Is he non-dom?
Yes.
Stephen Kinnock?
Yes.
You're joking?
No. He's domiciled in Switzerland for tax purposes.
Well, he's married to a Danish woman?
I don't know who's married.
Well, that would be why. Maybe she's supposed.
Well, she was.
This is you couldn't make it up territory.
Yeah,
Well, it is, but it is. We do focus on sort of one area. I've got to just mention as well, Susie. Morning, Susie. Stand strong, Prime Minister. She says. I don't understand what he's done wrong. How many MPs have been fined for speeding? And they do set ultimately the law. We don't expect them to resign.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a fair point, isn't it?
it's not. I don't think you can compare a driving offence with breaking the protocol of lockdown, because that had serious health implications that we all as a nation had to adhere to. No one liked being locked up or locked down, and most of us did comply with that.
Can I just interject here? Apparently, Stephen Kinnock has tweeted that he is a British citizen and that his wife is not a non-dom. That's what he's tweeted, apparently.
But for tax purposes, I thought he was resident in Switzerland.
Making that point, we can find out. We can find out more, but that's what he's actually said on Twitter.
I'm a British citizen. I've lived and worked permanently in the UK since 2012, paying UK tax on every penny of my income. My wife is not a non-dom. Those are the facts. Anything else is libel.
Right. Okay.
So there you go. That's
Since 2012.
So the learned friends are going to be rounded up and come against people who dare suggest the contrary.
Well, yeah.
Well, everybody's going to be hunted down and interrogated about their domicile status.
It all makes work for the working man to do.
Well, it does. Well, mind you, it's all about the facts, though, isn't it, in all of this, which is important.
Not take a sick leave.
What about climate? Oh, no, that was the last hour.
Yeah, travel chaos.
Travel
chaos, David. I cannot understand why we are going through such appalling chaos.
I mean, travellers must brace for a year of airport chaos, says David Churchill, the transport editor of the Mail. In other words, a lot of people were let go. A lot of these people were not just people who could be walked in, stuck in a uniform and go on. There were a lot of security people who have their own security clearance and so on. And just to cheer you up, the Daily Mirror has an interesting piece which says, Easter weekend misery for millions.
Hooray!
Yet Roads, RAC, predicts the busiest Easter bank holiday. Rail, no trains here, no trains there. Work at Gatwick Airport Station means some trains won't stop.
What?
With one train per hour between Redhill and Gatwick. Airports, more than 9,000 flights are scheduled to depart. Manchester Airport, which hasn't covered itself with glory, says, arrive at the earliest time your airline allows to check in. I mean, do you know what? I haven't travelled through a British airport since I returned from South Africa in June of 2020. I decided there were better places to be. And so I got myself a little place in Dorset where I was brung up or dragged up. And I hope you're admiring, because there's no makeup here. This is my tan. This is Dorset.
It's a Dorset tan.
And I tell you what,
some of it is rust, but, you know, the rain, but it's Dorset tan.
It hasn't half bleached your hair.
Yeah, well, and then once again, no artificial products. I am entirely as nature intended.
Right.
And for those of you listening on the radio, David has a very fine head of hair.
A mane.
Which is almost touching his collar. Well, it is touching your collar.
Yes. Well, I thought, if you got it, flaunt it.
Well, flaunt it. I quite agree.
I see all these guys are wonderful slap heads. You see every bit of their scalp and skull, and I think, I'm not like that.
No.
Not if you've got it.
My genes are better than that.
Fine genes. Can we look at GPs in the Express? They're talking about an exodus of GPs, Claire.
Yeah, well, there are. 2/3 over the age of 50 plan to quit the NHS as general practitioners. They were promised before the pandemic 2,000 extra, and with the ones that are leaving now, they've left a massive deficit now. But there are more in training, so it's not all bad news. A lot of people still are finding it gravely difficult to get a face-to-face appointment with their GP. But we have to look at ourselves and think, who cares for the carers? You don't, I mean, they're doing wonderful, wonderful jobs when you get to see them or if you have a telephone consultation with them now. I think we, as a society, are our own worst enemies in that we often Google our symptoms and then we come up with things that we perceive might be wrong with us. And therefore, what do? We go and we seek treatment. When you are presenting to a GP with your symptoms, they have a duty of care to take it very seriously and to treat those symptoms as a whole, holistically. Those symptoms might be, not made up, but they might be superimposed against the backdrop of other things. So therefore, what happens? You've got more testing, more referrals to secondary and tertiary care providers. Then if you cannot get to see the GP, what happens? Because of the pandemic, the problem has been kicked down, the can's been kicked down the road. A&Es are full to the gunnels of people sitting with triaged, minute issues. They have got a thankless task in many cases. I think the
Is
suicide...
it thankless? I mean, time and again I speak to people who love their GPs, who really rate them and value them.
How that does not sit against 2/3 over the age of 50
I know.
wanting to
why
leave.
Why are they so
because
unhappy?
they're so burnt out, because they've got so much pressure. You've only got a 10-minute consult, and we all know that's not enough. It's
It must
really
be
not.
exhausting, actually.
It must be.
A different set of problems every 10
Every 10 minutes. Yeah.
I don't think I could cope with that.
No.
You wouldn't have the answers for it either, because there's more and more things being treated nowadays than ever before. We think we have to be treated for X, Y, and Z. There's surgery to do X, Y, and Z. We are not comfortable, a lot of us, in our own skin, that we want to change facets of ourselves in order to make ourselves feel better. That's not what the NHS was built for. That's not what they...
I don't know. I mean, that's getting people going. Susie says, I like many others, have no clue why GPs are complaining constantly. All I can remember is my GP from my childhood through to delivering my children. He worked his socks off because he loved his job and had found his vocation. He held your hand when delivering bad news and was joyful when delivering new life. Where are those GPs now? Most are part-time and complaining of long hours.
And most are snuggled under loads of paperwork as well that they have to get through.
So we're not looking after them well enough?
I don't think we're looking after them well enough at all.
Oh.
That old adage.
Do you remember your childhood
GP?
GP?
Yes.
Do you remember the name?
He's called Dr. Cunningham.
There you are.
And well, of course, we had no choice. My mother had a sort of home birth, and I started off life as I intended to continue it. I was incredibly difficult to get out.
Really?
It was only thanks to Dr. Cunningham that I'm here.
Well, we'll
so
blame
anyone who
Dr.
wants
Cunningham.
to blame him for that fact...
Bisi, do you remember your childhood
passed
GP?
away now.
I always did used to remember his name, and I can picture him, but I can't remember his name now. He had glasses.
Did you
and
like
sort of
him?
Curly hair. Lovely
Yeah,
man.
see, I liked mine, Dr.
He was a
Elliott.
lovely
What
man.
about you?
Dr. Cannon and his son then took over the family practice.
Wow.
So it just goes on and on. But
See, that's
in
how
Scotland.
important it is to have a relationship with a GP.
Yes.
See,
But
now I know,
no
but when they ask who my doctor
Yeah.
is now, I know the name of the surgery, but I haven't got a
Yeah,
specific
but that's
doctor.
the reason, exactly what you've just said, that in the old days, I'm not going to say the good old days, because there was plenty that was bad about the old days, but you did have a doctor and you could identify with the doctor.
Yeah.
The doctor became a friend.
Yes.
Now you go to these practices where you just don't know who you're going to see.
Yeah, this is the problem. We are out of time, believe it or not, but David Miller, Claire Muldoon, really good to see both of you this morning.
Brilliant.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
thank you
much
very
indeed.
much.
And we've got all the top stories heading away straight after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Our top story today, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak are among 50 people issued fines by the Met over lockdown breaches.
OK,
there you are.
Yes, I mean, it's quite something, isn't it? I mean, it's a very good morning to you, I should say. It is 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 13th of April. This is, of course, Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on GB News, on your TV and on your radio. It is very good to have you with us today. This is what we've got for you.
Yes, as I was saying, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have apologised, paid those fines issued to them for breaches of lockdown laws. Despite growing calls for him to resign, Boris Johnson has said that he wanted to get on and deliver the mandate he had. We'll be live in a moment from the PM's constituency of Uxbridge.
More than 20 people in New York have been injured after a gunman wearing a gas mask detonated smoke grenades and opened fire on commuters. A manhunt is underway after the man fled the scene.
The US President, Joe Biden, has accused Russia of committing genocide. He used that word in Ukraine. Speaking at an event last night in Iowa, he said that Putin was trying to wipe out the idea of even being Ukrainian.
Anything you want to talk about this morning, get in touch. By heck, you emailing in this morning. We're going to try our best to get through as many of these views as possible. A lot of them about the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. GBviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBnews.
In fact, a bit earlier in the programme, Stephen conducted his own poll, didn't he, on Twitter?
Yes, it was
asking should the Prime Minister resign.
Interestingly, 3,068 people took part, which isn't bad. 67 people said he should stay.
67%.
67.
So 67 people after 3,000.
33% said he should go.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because clearly most people think he should stay, but they have reservations about what he did, what he has been found guilty of doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that, I mean, a lot of people getting in touch. Malcolm saying, it's a great point, Malcolm, how blessed we are having so many paragons of virtue in Parliament and wider society who are able to spot the immorality of the Prime Minister, I can only suggest these individuals invest in a mirror and take a good look at themselves.
Stephen says, I don't think the general public fully understand the way number 10 Downing Street functions. It isn't a house where people were invited to party. My understanding is that it's a workplace where 400 people work and have done during the pandemic, often in close proximity to each other. If they finished work and had a drink afterwards, I wouldn't consider that a party or an offence.
Yeah. Ian says, what a ridiculous waste of police time and money. We already knew what had happened. Why spend hundreds of thousands of pounds and hundreds of man-hours to issue a few £50 fines? Well, what are politicians and the political pundits making of all of this? Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, is in Downing Street for us this morning. I mean, look, a bit of a rough ride in the papers, in a sense, Tom. Do you think the Prime Minister will survive this?
Well, it's incredibly difficult to say at this point. Were the scandal to stop today, it's likely the Prime Minister would be able to ride it out. The big questions arising over this, however, are how many more fines are there to come? The Metropolitan Police have not concluded their investigation, and the 30-plus extra fixed penalty notice orders that were issued earlier this week, well, they were not the end of the story. We will know when the Metropolitan Police finish their investigation, because they'll tell us. So if there are more events to be analysed, more fines potentially to come, the situation could get stickier for the Prime Minister. However, there are some big points in the Prime Minister's favour in the eyes of Conservative MPs at the moment, not least the way in which the Prime Minister was received in Kyiv in Ukraine just over the weekend. Clearly the Prime Minister leading a global effort and being at the forefront of that global effort to make sure that Mr. Putin fails in Ukraine and to ensure that the West stays strong in support of Ukraine. Now, that's a big point that many Conservative MPs who you speak to will raise when it comes to discussing the mechanics of potentially dislodging a Prime Minister and launching a rather chaotic leadership election at the time of national crisis. The other point, I suppose, is that the fact of this party, this particular event, whether or not we call it a party, I suppose, is open to interpretation. Well, this doesn't seem to be the most major of breaches of lockdown in anyone's interpretation. This was an event that people in number 10 genuinely didn't think broke the rules. How do we know that? Well, they briefed this event out at the time, on the 19th of June 2020, to the press. It appeared in newspapers the next day, on the 20th of June 2020. No journalist who wrote that story, no member of the public who read that story kicked up a fuss at that point. Clearly, this particular event was not a lighting of anger. However, in the context of Partygate, with the further events that have been alleged coming to light, potentially that delivers more danger. So where we are at this point in time, I think, is a less precarious situation than we faced several months ago, a more calm Conservative Party. And let's not forget, it's the Conservative MPs who hold the sword of Damocles over the Prime Minister's neck at this point. It's Conservative MPs who can issue their letters or otherwise. They're the people that we need to listen to and that we need to consider the opinions of. At this stage, it doesn't look like Conservative MPs have an appetite for defenestration of their leader, for regicide. But potentially the temperature might change. Of course, we're in recess at the moment. Parliament doesn't return until the middle of next week. And indeed, that Metropolitan Police investigation does rumble on. If something else were to come out, potentially the temperature would change.
Tom, you mentioned regicide there. I mean, it does happen, particularly in the Tory party. If Boris were to go, and those who are calling for him to go maybe should be careful what they wish for. Earlier on in the programme, in fact, it was a good 3 hours ago, you outlined the amazing things that can happen, that people can come up out of nowhere when we get rid of a Prime Minister. Go through it again, because it was absolutely fascinating, the surprises that can come forward.
Oh, absolutely. Ever since the days in which there's been sort of a formal election structure for the leader of the Conservative Party back in 1975, no one expected that Margaret Thatcher, someone who was not considered to be anything other than a stalking horse at the time, would then become Conservative Party leader. And yet she did. Fast forward to the next Conservative leadership election in 1990. Very few people expected that John Major would become Conservative Prime Minister. Many people thought at that time it would be Michael Heseltine. Fast forward to 1997. Who would have thought that William Hague, a very young, fresh-faced MP, would become Conservative Party leader? Many people at the time thought potentially Ken Clarke would take it. Fast forward to 2001, when it looked like Michael Portillo would swoop in and take the leadership. Who got it in the end? It was Ian Duncan Smith. Michael Portillo missed out on being in the final round by just one vote. In 2005, people thought that potentially it would go to David Davis, someone who was seen to be a veteran, someone who was seen to be a steady hand, and yet it went to the young, enigmatic David Cameron. Few expected that at the start of the campaign. And then in 2016, after the Brexit referendum, potentially most people thought it would be going to Boris Johnson, one of the leaders of the Brexit campaign. Who did it go to in the end? Theresa May, someone who voted Remain. It's hard to overestimate how unpredictable Conservative leadership elections can be. And throughout the history of the Conservative Party, ever since there have been formal elections for the leadership of that party, more often than not, it's gone to an unexpected candidate than an expected one.
Fascinating stuff. I love hearing you say that. Tom, thanks very much indeed. Just shows anything can happen.
Always makes me feel sorry for Ken Clarke, though, because he was the one who never got a bite at the cherry. In almost all of those, he was sort of thought to be someone who could very likely get the job, and then never did.
And if Michael Portillo had got the job, we'd never have all those lovely railway documentaries.
Yes, but we'd have a PM wearing very strange jackets. To be fair, every time Michael walks in here on a Sunday morning when we see him, I think, well, what are you wearing?
And like I say, be careful what you wish for.
It's his little trademark. Now, of course, the Prime Minister actually isn't in Downing Street. He wasn't behind watching through the curtains as Tom was doing all of that, because he's gone to Chequers at the moment, and Paul Hawkins is there.
We're 40 miles from London in the Buckinghamshire countryside. This is the Prime Minister's rural retreat, Chequers, where he made that statement last night apologising for breaking lockdown rules. It was in stark contrast, the way he gave that statement, to what we saw at the weekend when he was strolling around the streets of Kiev in Ukraine, kind of very bold, winning plaudits, looking like a world leader. Last night, very, very different, giving that statement kind of awkwardly standing in a different angle to where the camera was. He was holding the statement down, reading off script, and his defence was essentially, well, I didn't know I was breaking the rules, to which the reporter asked them, well, they were the rules that you set. You saying you didn't know your own rules, but he stuck very much to the script. So very difficult for the Prime Minister. They will hope that this is now going to go away for number 10. The problem is that the Metropolitan Police are looking into 12 events in and around number 10, and at the moment we've had 2 waves of fines, and there will be more on the way, and potentially the Prime Minister could receive another fine. So it could get even more difficult for the Prime Minister as the Metropolitan Police investigation unfolds. What remains to be seen is whether any Conservative MPs will call for him to go as well. At the moment, none are breaking ranks. It's not like it was a few months ago when we saw the Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross, when we saw the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen calling for him to go. They're now saying that now is not the time for him to go, that there is the war in Ukraine, that there's the cost of living, that really the Prime Minister needs to stay in place. And indeed, even if they were to call for him to go, there is not enough time to get a leader in place for the local elections on May the 4th. So the Conservatives at the moment sticking behind the Prime Minister, but how long they're going to hold that position for, with the Metropolitan Police investigation ongoing, and of course Sue Gray, remember her report, which is due to be published in full as soon as the police conclude their investigation. It remains to be seen how long that's going to continue, with his own party sticking behind him. And of course it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out in the polls with voters in the local elections on May the 4th.
Well, thanks very much indeed for that. We've been to Downing Street there, where the Prime Minister isn't. We've been to Chequers, where the Prime Minister is. And now we're going to Uxbridge, because that's the Prime Minister's constituency. I wonder what his constituents make of all of this. Our London reporter Alice Porter is there for us now. Hi, Alice.
Hello there, good morning. Yes, this has been a very safe Tory seat ever since it was first created, and Boris Johnson has been the MP for Uxbridge and Ruislip since 2015. So it should be an area that is very much backs the Conservative Party. But I've been out and about speaking with people this morning, and I have to say there is a mood that is very much firmly against the Prime Minister and against this fine that he has received because of a party taking place at Downing Street. So I've been speaking to people this morning as they were going about their commute. This is what they had to say.
I work in a care home, and we were just in lockdown just a few weeks ago because we had the virus again, and I see the effect on family members, and to think that they were partying, it's wrong.
I just think it's really unfair because obviously they're telling people that they can't go to funerals, they can't go and see their loved ones. You've got people's mental health suffering, and then the male suicide rate is going up and up. And I think it just shows a real lack of respect that they have for the public, because obviously they're doing their own thing and then telling us another thing.
If he's going to set the rules, then he's got to stick to the rules. He's the same as you and I, same as anybody else. You get done, you're going to have to pay for it. So he's got to own up to it and, yes, I did wrong, and get it paid.
Well, he's let a lot of people down, and he lied to everybody, and he just done what he liked, and people suffered. And you can't accept that,
Do you think he should go?
Yeah.
So there are some of the constituents with Boris Johnson talking there, and as you can see, you can really hear the anger and frustration at the situation. But I think what's kind of striking with this is, what if the situation gets worse? We were hearing from Paul just before, just saying, if there are more fines issued by the Met Police, could the mood turn even sourer? I mean, it was interesting when I was speaking with those people earlier there. A lot of them said to me, actually, I'm a Conservative voter, but saying I simply couldn't vote for Boris Johnson again. And so I was quite surprised. I thought I'd get more people saying to me sort of things like, it's all in the past, we all need to move on. But every person I spoke to said they were really, really angry at their MP and their Prime Minister.
OK, Alice, thank you for that. I mean, it is an interesting perspective, isn't it? I wonder why, listening to the people Alice was talking to, and they say, we've been through this, we've done that, and they were partying. And I wonder if it's the perception of because what seems to be clear, actually, is that it wasn't a party. Well, on this particular instance, it wasn't a party, was it?
It's as one of our viewers said earlier, it depends what you call a party, doesn't it? But the word party is very damning, isn't it? Particularly in that instance. Andy says, this isn't about being caught having a cheeky few drinks. It's about the pain and misery they caused with those draconian rules that they thought didn't apply to them.
Mike says, when will everyone put things into perspective? Partygate has been blown out of all proportion. My father passed away in March 2020. We were only allowed one car and 12 mourners. Do I moan about Partygate? No. I worry more about the economy, Putin and the energy crisis, as these are far more important.
Yeah, Sam says Boris Johnson is the de facto leader of Europe in the fight against Putin. He has spoken out and backed Ukraine more effectively than any other world leader, and has been the only real thorn in Putin's side during this crisis. Therefore, now is completely the wrong time to ask him to resign.
Julia says Boris was presented with a birthday cake a few weeks after a hospital stay where he was in intensive care and in a pretty bad way. Surely we've got other things to worry about.
Richard says the Prime Minister says he's sorry and wants to get on with what he was mandated to do. He was mandated by the electorate to deliver his party's manifesto promises. These promises included not raising taxes and to keep the triple lock regarding pensions. Both of those promises have been broken. I voted Conservative at the last general election, but will probably abstain at the next. The other parties are a complete shower too.
Eddie says, I'm fed up with the suggestion that we should move on. No, we shouldn't. Johnson should go. He's lied to Parliament and the public. He's broken the ministerial code. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not quite sure. The ministerial code is complicated. He has no decency. The Labour Party with Keir Starmer would show moral leadership and decency.
Really?
Interesting. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We were talking about GPs earlier on. Your family doctor from when you were young. And I said I couldn't remember the name. I could picture mine, couldn't remember the name. Thanks, Dad, for messaging me. It's Dr. Sharples.
Ah, good old Dr.
Dr.
Sharples.
Sharples at Duke Street Surgery. I remember Duke Street Surgery.
You're right. You see, it's so important, isn't it, your relationship with the GP? Well, whether we move on or not, we've got to move on right now. Do stay with us because we've got a bit more after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
(9:21), good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the UK on both your TV and your radio.
So let's bring you up to date with the top stories so far today. The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will be sentenced at the Old Bailey later. Ali Harbi Ali was convicted of murder and preparing terrorist acts. He killed the Tory MP at his surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October. Mr Justice Sweeney could impose a whole life sentence, meaning Ali would never be released.
The cost of living crisis is getting worse, with inflation hitting another 30-year high. Official figures show it jumped to 7% in March, up from 6.2% in February. High petrol prices and food as well, said to be responsible for the rise.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor resisting calls to resign. They've paid fines for breaching lockdown rules. Boris Johnson said it didn't occur to him that his birthday gathering in June 2020 would break restrictions. They've both offered full apologies. So loads of you, absolutely loads of you getting in touch on this morning, and loads of different perspectives, which is really interesting. Barbara's been in touch. Morning, Barbara. It is true to say there was one rule for them and another for us, because there was one set of rules for essential workers and another set for those of us who stayed at home. The essential workers put themselves at risk for us. How thankless we are when we call them criminals.
That's an interesting view, isn't it, actually? Because the people who were working in number 10 were essential workers. Young people running government have to be essential, don't they?
Yeah.
So did...
See, this is why I love hearing from you.
It's complicated, isn't it?
Because you bring up these things that we just don't think of. That's really, I really appreciate that, Barbara.
Yeah, Mick says, great listening to GB News this morning, keeping the Partygate furore in perspective. And no, Boris Johnson should absolutely not resign.
Janet says, what was Boris meant to do? His wife arranged a cake, he had no idea, and it all lasted about 10 minutes.
Yeah, and I can see within the confines of number 10 and with all of those essential workers working around them that it would seem a little harmless to just prepare a cake and wish him a happy birthday. He was, after all, the Prime Minister. And I don't know, you can see both sides of the problem, can't you?
I just saw that with a lot of these things. I know there is a difference because these are the people who make the rules that we have to abide by. However...
They do an extraordinary job inside number 10.
Yeah, but you do sort of think, how many of us, if we'd been in... You know, because I was working at home for some of it, but in the office for other bits of it, and someone had brought... In fact, someone at some point did bring me a bunch of flowers because it was a work anniversary thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, it wasn't on camera, but...
During lockdown, my son and his girlfriend were staying with us. We were a bubble. And if they'd got a birthday cake, if it had been my birthday and wished me a happy birthday, would that have been breaking the rules? No.
Susan says, both Sunak and Boris should resign. I voted Tory, but I didn't vote for liars and tax avoiders to lead this country. They lied in Parliament, they lied in interviews, they lied to the people.
Boris shouldn't resign, says Eunice. He's done a good job as Prime Minister and has had some really tough problems to deal with, which he has done well. So perhaps we can forgive him for an error of judgment.
And Pamela says no other PM could have done the job better than Boris. Like him or loathe him, millions of people broke the rules to suit themselves, while millions stuck to the rules. It's not the time to change PM. Leave him to get on with running the country and to help sort out.
And maybe do that and then judge him on his ability to get us out of these latest crises.
Yeah, really interesting to hear all your thoughts today. We'll have more of your thoughts tomorrow because we're going to be back from 6 o'clock, aren't we?
We will, yes, apparently we'll be back at 6 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes.
So
yeah, don't go anywhere.
do join us.
Yeah, Tom Harwood's up next. He's got the briefing live from Downing Street, so really, don't go anywhere.
Hello, a very good morning to you. A bit of a gloomy start out there for many of us, but skies will slowly brighten for the vast majority, allowing some sunshine to develop, but also some heavy showers. The air remains both warm but also unstable, and that's because we've got low pressure to the southwest at the moment, a mild southerly airflow, but also we've got a lot of cloud in the sky. And with that cloud, further outbreaks of rain will continue for northeast Scotland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England as well. Further showers to come through parts of central and southern England as we start off the day. After a gloomy start with a lot of low cloud, mist and hill and coastal fog, the skies do brighten somewhat. Some sunshine comes through, but those showers in the south could be quite lively by the afternoon. Away from the showers, 20, 21 Celsius in the south, 18 for Glasgow, but staying cool in the northeast of Scotland where we keep a lot of cloud cover. Into the evening then, and skies clear in places, but further low cloud, mist and hill fog will creep back in from the southwest. So for Wales, southwest England, northeast Scotland as well, it's a claggy old night. Clear spells elsewhere, but even where we've got the clear skies, it's going to be frost-free as we start off tomorrow morning. And there will be some sunshine in places, and even where we've got the low cloud to begin things, that'll tend to gradually lift and break. So skies brightening for many, and by the afternoon, for most places, actually, it's looking dry and bright. Sunny spells, 1 or 2 showers in the east of England. Otherwise, for the vast majority, it is looking like a fine day and a warm day. 18 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from central Scotland to the south of England, and in some places 22 Celsius. Good Friday's looking even warmer. There'll be a few showers around, but on the whole, the trend is for drier, brighter and warmer weather to the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some